Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. I'll call the meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. If you have not already signed in, there is a sign-in sheet. We'd love to know who's here with us. Thank you for being here. We certainly appreciate it. Mr. Hanna, can you confirm that we have a quorum, sir?
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Council, the appointment of an interim city clerk for this meeting is needed due to our city clerk attending required educational credit training in Athens. If we could have a motion to appoint Kim Goldner, interim city clerk, for this meeting only.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, council? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you, council. You have an agenda before you previously distributed. Yield the floor for a motion.
Make a motion we adopt the agenda as distributed.
Motion to have a second.
Second.
Any discussion, council? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you, council. All right, at this time, I'm going to open a public hearing, which is for fiscal year 2025's budget. The public hearing, Mr. Douglas, I'm going to let you go ahead and start off with your part. As a reminder to the public hearing is for us to hear from you. If you have input, we're going to present some information. We'll go through the numbers, each department, all the lines of revenue. A public hearing is not a forum for back and forth. What we'll do is we'll take your questions. After the public hearing is closed, then we will go through and be able to address those questions. Mr. Douglas, go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to kind of hopefully help with tonight's budget hearing, we put together a PowerPoint presentation, and we will make this available after the meeting to be posted on our website. As you will recall, we had provided you all the preliminary budget, draft budget, after the November 4th meeting. It's been on the website, and we have advertised for this public hearing with a subsequent consideration and approval for our December 2nd regular meeting. So tonight we'll kind of walk through different components of the budget. I do know that the document that's before you and that's on the website at times can be a little confusing and or daunting because you're dealing with governmental accounting and municipal budgets. So we've tried to extract a lot of the information on PowerPoint to make it a little easier to follow along and to kind of walk through. So with respect to the general fund, revenues and expenses, you may recall during the October 7th millage rate approval, we were tasked with looking at ways to reduce certain expenditures. And if you recall, our preliminary budget, when staff had looked at it, we're going to look at using about $377,000 worth of fund balance. Ms. Lindsay, and she's essentially got it down to about $182 use of fund balance. This proposed budget is about $20,000 less than the 2024 adopted budget. However, we'll kind of walk through some changes already because of the evolution of a budget. Water sewer fund revenues and expenses. This is pretty well remained consistent. You'll hear from Ms. Kim in a little bit in terms of kind of what the 2024 budget was relative to this proposed 2025. So as we discussed before, this is just to kind of illustrate the number of sources of revenue. We have about 92 lines of revenue sources. For the most part, 90% of those are active, meaning that they do have an associated amount to them. The graphical depiction will kind of illustrate a little better in terms of the composition of the revenue. You'll see that the real property tax is 30%, sales and use tax about 28%, and then you'll see all the other remaining sources of revenue that essentially allow for us to provide these services. This is a familiar slide because in terms of providing police, fire, code compliance, planning and zoning, inspections, municipal court, public works, which does consist of streets, stormwater, parks, administrative services, elections, animal control. So part of walking through the general fund, it does help us to provide services to our nearly 4,800 residents. That information is there just to kind of show the boundaries that we do work with in terms of that is our corporate city limits. So we have nearly 4,800 residents. We've had a pretty consistent growth model in terms when the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey puts this data out. The 2000, 2002, 2010, 2012, 2020, 2022 are sourced from the U.S. Census. There is not the 2024 at this moment, but extrapolating out the 6.5%, which is consistent with the 20 to 22. That's how we arrive at the nearly 4,800 residents with nearly 2.4 persons per household, which is kind of a universal standard in a lot of jurisdictions. That again is sourced through the U.S. Census Bureau. So that's important for later on in terms of just making sure that all those services, you'll see the pretty expansive area that is the city limits. Kind of jumping into revenue. Once again, these are the line items, a little more zoomed in to where you'll see the proposed use of $182,000 worth of fund balance. I believe the budgeted use of fund balance for 2024 was just over $200,000. So if you recall, during the millage rate hearings, the staff had essentially tried to identify a millage rate that would be a little more sustainable in terms of saying how much can we try to rely less on fund balance, knowing that the 2024 did have a $200,000 or so use of it. Our preliminary projections were around 377. So I'm very pleased that the team has kind of come together and looked at ways to reduce that down. Again, kind of walking through the budgeted use or budgeted revenue. We are taking a conservative approach of saying that, again, another large item of revenue is building permits. When an external stakeholder, builder, developer, etc., wants to get to a point of pulling the building permit, that means they walk through the process with Mary and her team. They're ready now to pay for the permit, to then get it, to then construct. That is things that we don't have control over. So the approach that we are taking at the staff level is doing a more conservative approach, because if we were to end the 2025 fiscal year and there has been more building permits, then that allows us to use that much less of fund balance as different revenue sources come in. You'll see, going back a slide, to the lost proceeds. Once again, that is the local option sales tax that is kind of consistent with persons who come through our community. I tell folks that if you spend $100, that's essentially, $1 coming into the coffers for that. Going into additional revenue, you'll see that there is an associated use of $76,000. The way that the Downtown Development Authority, it is a component unit of the city. So you'll see that there is a budgeted amount allocated, but it's not through the general fund revenue. It's from use of hotel motel tax and donations. But in terms of booking it on our balance sheets, we have to reflect it as revenue, even though it's not direct general fund revenue, because they're a component unit of the city. We reflect it as revenue, but then when you expense it out, it's through the DDA for Downtown Live and other things. Municipal court, similar type situation, about $300 worth of revenue to help offset some of the associated costs of running court. So I alluded to it a little bit ago, but from the time that this particular document, this draft, was published, there have been some identified needs just in terms of some statutory. We have to be in compliance with House Bill 451 that the state approved that public safety personnel. We do have to budget for some insurance policy. Additionally, you'll see that one of the things that we do not have is an IT department. So we outsource our IT services. We do have certain technological needs that we've talked with them in the last several weeks. So we're going to have to, and Ms. Lindsay is going to incorporate this into the different department line items in terms of the software needed and upgrades. In addition to the fact that we were aware that we do not have an EAP program for our team, so we are incorporating that into the budget that will be presented to you all in December 2nd. So once again, we'll kind of keep walking through the budget, but I just wanted to kind of point out that you don't set it and forget it. You just continue to work and operate within the best parameters you can. Again, the expenditures, sometimes the depiction can kind of help. I thought it'd be fun to mix it around and put fire as blue and PD is red, but Lindsay decided to keep it civil, so it does help to kind of show the color coordinated. But again, that's not really foreign to any jurisdiction. You're going to have 60% or more of public safety being from your general fund expenditures. So that's not something that's too terribly alarming or shocking. It's just consistent with as your community grows, your public safety personnel grows as well. So getting into the different expenditures, wanted just to kind of show you where we've tried to reduce some of the expenditures from the 2024 to the actual request. And part of Mayor and Council, what we've had as the team here tonight, that when we get to a particular department and you're going to see a red circle, there have been capital needs that the department needs that have been removed for purposes of this process because the needs outweigh the actual amount that we can. So the department leaders are here to at least explain some of the needs. And again, because this process works, council has the ultimate authority in terms of saying, well, let's tap a little more into our savings account to fund these particular needs. We can't fund all of them, but this is kind of how we can kind of work through the process. So again, we kind of covered this a little bit in the millage rate discussions with respect to cost allocation. You do have salary and benefits. This particular executive line, you have half of mine, the assistant, city clerk, HR director, and community development position into this one. The half of CM, ACM, and city clerk HR is also in the water enterprise because use of our time. You can allocate it 80-20, 70-30. For budgeted purposes, we've done 50-50 because we feel as though that's an appropriate use. You'll also notice that as we continue to mature, grow, develop, evolve as a community, it is not foreign to have a human resource actual department budget. Right now, we do not. The HR position is actually in this one. The HR generalist is in the actual finance, which is, again, half of Lindsay and a couple from her team, and the HR generalist are in the finance budget, and about 20% of customer service because they do deal with some general fund practices. But then the majority of our customer service team is into the actual water fund. So again, we've tried to identify ways of reducing. So you'll see that from the request to the actual preliminary, we've tried to scale it back. The elections, we did talk about how that is something that we outsource to the county, but we do have to budget some amounts to help. With respect to the finance, again, Going back, Mayor and Council, you may have heard me say this before, but in the general fund budget, meaning what we looked at a moment ago in terms of that 7+ million, 82% is salary benefits, 18% is other. Now that's just a 80-20, you could say. You'll see the fire department's budget in a moment. 90% is salary bennies, 10% other. Police, 88% salary bennies, about 12% other. There is no recipe for anything in terms of saying, well, what's the correct mix? It's jurisdictional based. We've continued to try to fund our departments at a level of professionalism. You'll hear from the chiefs in just a moment, and Josh and Charles and the team about we are still doing good with the staff we have, but you'll see the expansiveness of our jurisdictional boundaries are such that if there's a call on the south end or north end, we've got maybe 2 officers at any time. So going into the municipal court, this is again half of the municipal clerk and deputy municipal clerk are in this budget, and the other half is in the police department budget from a cost allocation. We do not have the staffing that can be 100% dedicated to either one. So until such time that we can, we're going to have to continue to budget. About half of Tanya and Jill's time is going to have to be devoted to helping Chief and his team, and then on the court days. Just to kind of point out, Chief and I were talking, Chief Dawkins and I were talking, in the process of us trying to reduce some of these expenditures, we did come through and just kind of reduce. So you'll see the point in here that we have reduced some training travel. Well, there's an element of mandatoriness that the municipal clerk has to go to. That number is going to have to increase to the 4,000 as was requested. The good part is we're communicating as a staff so we don't run into the spring of next year and oops, we forgot to budget or we failed to put back in the 1,500. So Lindsay's going to put the 1,500 back in, so that's another change. Chief, anything to add on that one? That was pretty much it for.
Yeah, for court, it's
Yep.
pretty much explained it.
And so we'll start with the police. I'll kind of tee it up that you'll hear sometimes if you hear Chief say that we are fully staffed, what that means is budgeted positions are filled. In any budget, you can have budget positions that are vacant. When you hear Chief say he's fully staffed, that doesn't always translate into the needed. So I'll kind of let Chief explain a little bit about there was a request, but then due to the fact that we do not have the amount of funding necessary to fund that, it's basically no additional budgeted staff above and beyond where we're current levels at from 24. And then Chief can kind of segue into some of the capital needs that had gotten removed. We'll talk about the positions.
Okay, as the city manager said, well, first off, good evening. As the city manager did say, fully staffed is kind of probably not the best way to explain it, but so at one point this year all our positions were taken up, which was great. And now we're down to we need 1. So in the budget, we asked for 4 more positions. 2 of those positions would go to UPD, which would bring it to 3 on each rotation. So 3 on days, 3 on nights, and a split shift on one rotation. The other rotation would have 3, a split, and 3. So we'd be up 1 officer on each rotation, which would be great. Then we'd also have 1 for the Criminal Investigation Division, which would put them at 3, which is greatly needed because I presented earlier this year, everything's going up, they're staying more busy, and there's a lot that goes on in CID that most people don't know about. So that would be a great asset. Also, one would be looked at adding a evidence custodian position. So all they would do is run evidence, which is a 5-day-a-week job, 8 hours a day, probably longer. They'd also collect evidence on scenes. They would testify in court. It'd be a huge asset. In this case right now, obviously we wouldn't be able to. We're still going to operate fine. But these are the things that we're going to need in the future as the city grows, population grows. That's where we're at on those. When it comes to some of the equipment that's needed, as it would be considered a capital project, I'll go into the ballistic vest. Those have a shelf life, believe it or not. So every 5 years, you need to renew your vest. If you don't, and something were to happen, then that liability falls back on the city, not the manufacturer of the vest. So we have approximately, I think it's 10 vests coming up as of July 9th, 2025 that would need to be renewed, which brings it about to 15,000 for a total. Also, when we have people, we have vehicles. Vehicles we have a take-home program for the officers that meet our radius or mileage radius. 4 vehicles, as prices go up, vehicles go up and the equipment goes up. I think one vehicle is 47, almost 48,000. It costs almost 28,000 to equip it. That's just one vehicle. You're looking around $300 and something thousand for that. Those are all things we'd have to have. There's some software that we were looking at that would help the investigations a lot better. It's called Leads Online. That's just an annual amount of $7,000.
So as Chief pointed out, currently we have one position that's vacant and we'll fill that. Then we'll be fully staffed at the budgeted amounts from 2024 and 2025. So to Chief's point, the reason we wanted to kind of draw attention to this is because they run 12-hour shifts in a 24-hour period, whenever you look at public safety, and you'll hear from Chief Sherry in a moment, it's not like you can just add one police officer. You can, but in terms of from a shift perspective, you would say there's 2 shifts, therefore two persons. In the case of the evidence tech, I am a proponent of an evidence tech as a civilian. It doesn't have to be a sworn officer. But once again, there's no identified funding to create that position. But I think it's prudent for us to at least bring it to your attention, because if we are not expressing to you the forecasted needs, we're doing you a disservice in your decision-making process. With regards to the funding for capital, I do think it's imperative for us to utilize $15,000 of fund balance to accommodate the purchase of the 10 vests. The reason why it was removed is I did take the guidance of trying to eliminate as much as we can, and it is an exercise that rather than me just sneaking it in here to illustrate that there is an element of cost associated with doing these jobs. You'll hear from Chief Sherry in just a moment, but just kind of wanted to point that out, and also just to commend Chief and his team for trying to continue to inspire the officers and all the staff of continuing to operate at 24 levels, knowing that the 25 is just going to be kind of status quo.
Before you move on, Chief, what was the total on your vest?
15,000.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
And so with the fire department, I'll let Chief Sherry kind of give a synopsis. You'll hear some similarities, and I think you'll kind of catch on to kind of the way that the shifts run, 24, 12, et cetera.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening. We'll start at the top, much like Chief Dawkins did with the regular employees. I would say first that we run 24 on, 48 off, so we have 3 shifts. So we had asked for 3 personnel, which would take us from a staffing level of 5 to 6. But the 3 personnel, obviously that's 1 per shift, so it would be 1 position continuously. It just takes 3 people, much like police officers have to do with their shifts. The reason we asked for that is we're trying to go to a position to where we have 3 apparatus in service at all times. Right now we have 2. For ISO, they want us to put 2 engines and a ladder truck on the scene of every structure fire. We're working hard to achieve that goal. But as you know, our apparatus are a lot bigger for the size of commercial vehicles. It takes 2 people to safely operate them. We have a driver and we have an officer that acts with that driver and helps them out. Operating radios, emergency warning features, and all the other equipment in the truck. That way that driver can focus on driving and other traffic on the roadway. But like I said, that's what that position was for, is for the 3 people that would act as a 6th man on the shift, or 6 firefighter on the shift. That way we could have 3 in-service apparatus at all times. We're supplementing right now with part-time, so we're using our part-time to try and be at that 6-man minimum, but the problem we're running into is obviously part-time, they've got other jobs and they're not solely dedicated to us, so it's not always 100% consistent. But we are striving to do that with the current staffing that we have as well. Moving down to capital expenses, we have requested a computer and a radio to go in the new on-order engine. And then also we have requested fire hose for supply line for engine 2 and engine 3. You may recall we got a grant last year and we're able to convert our over 3-inch hose into 4-inch hose. That went on the ladder truck in engine 1. So that project was supposed to finish that out. That way all the apparatus had uniform supply line on. The supply line is larger, holds more water, will flow more water, allow us to fight fire a little better and supply our aerial truck. Turnout gear was also one of the things that we had to reduce. We budget for turnout gear every year because inevitably it gets torn, it gets contaminated, and it has a shelf life of 10 years as well. Most of the time it doesn't last the 10 years. When you consider how active we are in fire suppression, automobile electrification, and other avenues of technical rescue that we're wearing that turnout gear in, as well as training as well. It wears out pretty regularly, and we budget to replace at least 5 to 6 sets a year. We also have a regular rotation in place that's utilized for as well. We also have requested a vehicle. That's a small vehicle, 2025 Chevy Silverado. What that was going to do was put us another vehicle in our fleet, and that was going to allow us to roll our 2017 Explorer to a reserve vehicle because we don't have a spare. Like I said, right now what we did to alleviate that is we pulled in the 2005 Colorado and we pressed it back into service for the time being. So we have a pool vehicle if one of the frontline vehicles goes down. Let's see. And then we had allocated $60,000 for a radio frequency for the fire department to operate off. Currently, all Pickens County fire departments, whether city, Bentry, I think Big Canoe has their own frequency, but most all departments operate on a Pickens County fire repeater. And then when we have an incident, we have to transfer over to what's called a TAC channel. Well, that TAC channel is not monitored by anyone. It's just like a 2-way walkie-talkie frequency. So we were going to put up a separate frequency and utilize that, and also have to be a backup for if the main frequency goes down. That would allow us to have a monitored backup channel in case we have problems with the main, and also have a tactical channel that's monitored by someone when we're firefighting operations. I think that pretty well goes over the changes and modifications in our budgets and our lines.
So one of the reasons why, again, I want to kind of illustrate, because I think that a lot of times it's easier to articulate, looking at the red circle. That's really the point that is kind of within the controls of saying the needs and or wants And whereas unless you begin talking about a reduction in force, that's why I wanted to draw your attention that there's been no directives from this body or even from staff of doing any sort of reduction in forces. So the budget process is mainly the red circle. And so I'm an advocate that you gotta have the vest, you gotta have the turnout gear. And so, part of it is, as we kind of continue this process in the discussion portion, Lindsay's prepared, you'll notice on every slide to the far right is the 2025 adopted budget. I never want to presume what the adopted budget is going to be asked about. You all can say, well, slide over salary, benefits, operating, and then from a capital perspective, add back in X, Y, and Z. That will then enable Lindsay to have direction to move in that manner. And then she could say, your use of fund balance would be, instead of 182, would be 277, which again, my position would be, it would still be 100,000 less than the preliminary numbers when we were talking because of some other cost-cutting measures. So again, going to another general fund service, animal control. There is no budgeted monies for a new vehicle. Mary, how old is the vehicle that Ryan's riding around?
It's a 2008, it has 267,000 miles on it.
So we'll probably spend a little bit of money on just kind of keep it going, but we do have a fleet maintenance guy that does a pretty good job, but there is just no monies available, for a new vehicle, so that one was eliminated. And again, there's nothing really groundbreaking on this one in terms of just salary bennies and just normal operating of gas, oil, parts, training. I think Ryan is about to finish up, or he's already received one of his certifications.
Yes, in September, he became a certified code enforcement officer, level 1.
And so that's who fills in half of the animal control is also the code compliance in another form. So I'm gonna hand this off to Kim and Josh. You wanna kind of talk a little bit about the street department?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So for the Streets Department, there was a request for additional personnel. That was also built in to provide a little bit of organizational structure, though, to allow for some promotional opportunities, to have another crew leader, to have other shifts, to try and do Public Works Technician 1 and 2, those sorts of things. We will work within the confines of our budget. Josh has done a very admirable job with what he has down there. The folks are awesome. You may have seen them. They are the same folks that we have working at all of our downtown events that are out decorating for Christmas right now, that are taking care of our streets, clearing out stormwater issues. They're doing everything, taking care of our parks. I think the important part, if we could go down, you'll see an arrow lining over to public streetlights. And so that is a function of something that the city handles. When a neighborhood goes in, the streetlights are installed and the city takes over that responsibility for paying those bills. Some municipalities do assess a fee on bills to help offset that monthly cost. That is not something that the city does. We are responsible for that, and with new neighborhoods coming on with additional lighting upgrades and things, that cost is going up. In the red circle, these are some items that the team had identified that some admittedly we'd like to have. It would certainly make jobs much easier. One of these though, and that is, I'll take you down to the vehicle. That is to replace a 2006 3500 crew truck that has 288,000 miles on it and currently is not running. Josh, what is the issue with that?
The turbo would went out.
Okay. So we can certainly put money into it to keep it going. There comes a point though where, you know, you have to decide, is it replace, is it keep it running? Josh has identified that a larger truck would actually be the better way to go, and so we would like to replace that truck if at all possible. But again, that is a council decision on what you would like to do. We would also like to go back to gas burning, not diesel, to get away from the DEF issue. There was a request, you'll see the $235,000 for machinery and equipment. The lion's share of that amount was for a new street sweeper. Josh, what have you identified as what would be a cost savings and what would actually make more sense for the department?
For us, I believe it would be better for us just to get a broom to go on a skid steer. It's got the bucket on it. We can use it downtown. It just sweeps whatever debris in on the street into the bucket. We just pick it up, put it in the back of the dump truck. Not only would I be able to use it, Charles would too, for leaks and whatever else. It would be, in my opinion, I think it would be more functional than one machine.
The street sweeper is also a more complicated piece of equipment, and we do have a fabulous mechanic who has proven that he is able to take care of our aging fleet. He has been able to do preventative maintenance work on our equipment that has saved thousands of dollars. But that is a complicated piece of equipment, and I'm not sure that that is the right choice for the city at this point. And so, for the skid steer, a broom, the sweep attachment on it would serve that same purpose. There was also an excavator request in there as well. This is, I believe, to replace an aging piece of equipment that is also nearing its end of life. I think council has seen that we have kind of culled out through the process of looking at our fleet some equipment that does need to go ahead and just be decommissioned. And so that is the auction that y'all had approved for us to go ahead and pursue through GovDot, Gov Deals or whatever the website may be right now. But an excavator, again, would be multi-purpose. It could be used by Charles's department in the utilities, and it could also be used by Josh's department. That would really help us with stormwater-related projects. I think y'all remember the Pioneer Road project. That was something that we did not have the equipment to be able to handle, and an excavator would at least give us the ability to do more projects like that, or projects that maybe are on a slightly smaller scale that we just don't have the equipment for right now. We have to farm a lot of that work out.
And so you'll hear again, just in terms of, I know we talked about it in a percentage perspective, but of the $7.3 million general fund budget, you've got about $5.2 million worth of that revenue that is outside of property tax, that is out of our control. I mean, there's other, 5.2 million is why at times it can fluctuate such that we do not go out and purchase a brand new vehicle, but having to disclose the fact that there are all those capital items that we continue to defer, but at some point in time, you're going to continue maintaining things to a point of where it's no longer going to make economic sense. Again, I don't necessarily have a staff city manager recommendation. If it was, in an ideal world, even when you talk about the personnel, how many team members do you have for streets?
10.
9. Because you got one position unfilled, I believe. It's budgeted but unfilled, I think.
Yes. And I was trying to count the mechanic, but he's fleet.
He's fleet. So again, when we talk about that, it's not this huge, amount of personnel that can kind of go out. The way that we kind of try to do things for events is to stage it where you have 2 or 3, in these 18-hour days to kind of shift work. So again, I would always be an advocate for 2 to 3 additional personnel but it's just not feasible with the revenue. Again, going to the fleet maintenance, half of the position is funded through the general fund. The other half is funded through the enterprise. I do know that in the past, we've had two maintenance personnel, but just through the evolution of trying to be efficient and cost cutting when something happens to where, you know, we can try to make do or send it to a mechanic. We just have one mechanic on the job right now. So no real new equipment. I think the proposed, I didn't put a red circle, but I think it's 7,500 for the, was a wire feed welder. Again, because of the way that we do budget in terms of if we were to see the first or second quarter with some revenues exceeding our projected budget amounts, we would come back to you all with a proposed amended budget to say some of these deferred items, such as for Josh's team or even on the 7,500, we think that based upon the forecasting of the remainder of the year, we could amend the budget to kind of go purchase that. But for right now, we're not including that in because once again, we don't know how those sources are going to play out. This is another one where there was an adopted budget, but there was a position that was not filled. So during the amended budget process in July, the position was eliminated. It doesn't mean that anyone was let go. It just means that there was nobody in that position. So again, from a department needs request, I think that there is a need for 3 individuals. I believe, Josh, Kim, that's what we had identified as about 3 personnel. So that's why you see the department request, because in an ideal world, we feel as though that if the budget would hold, we could hire 3 individuals that could essentially relieve some of the duties from the street to do a more robust job with our parks. They do a fantastic, when I say parks, oftentimes I lump downtown into that, just because of between City Park, Perot, Peace Park, and Lee Newton being so close, that's in your downtown. Granted, Doris Wingington, the trying to structure that is, you know, more of an active with cyclists, et cetera. But again, nothing groundbreaking in this particular budget, kind of status quo from years past of making sure that you all know that we're not ignoring the fact that we would like to have budgeted 1, 2, 3 positions to help. But at this moment, in order to help get the budget balance as best we can, minimizing the use of fund balance, this is kind of what's being presented. This is in any governmental, GASB, governmental accounting, protective inspections, that's building inspections. I will tell you that in the last couple of weeks, we've identified the need to increase the contract inspections because there are certain specialties that are required, mechanical, electrical, plumbing certifications that are required, that we're going to need to increase that from 15 to most likely, I think, Mary, we said 50,000 to help offset some inspection services.
Yeah, 50,000.
Yep. So what we would be presenting to you all is an additional 35,000 budgeted to contract that out. Again, it's not as simple as me trying to go and find a person to hire, because if you were to hire someone at a reasonable salary, you never have to double that with required benefits. So at times it's easier or more cost effective to outsource some components. Again, no capital expenditures in this particular budget. I will say that I'll give Mary and her team kudos. When you see a reduction in legal fees, that's not to mean litigation. Oftentimes, even from an ordinance preparation and review, Mary has kind of gotten a team member on board to kind of help with some of those. I'll kind of let her kind of elaborate on that team member and maybe some future benefits of hiring that person, as well as the capital down in the circle that's not funded.
Yes, thank you, Brandon. So basically, we have been fortunate enough, when we hired our planner, she has an actual legal background. So she worked in a law firm as a land use planner for 8 years. So she's got very valuable knowledge, and is, from a point of view of trying to not make me work 80 hours a week. Her knowledge is well surpassed. I mean, we were lucky because we were looking at entry level, and we were lucky that she did apply because she is by all means an incredible asset, and I can guide, I don't have to teach. So we've been very fortunate with that, and what we're looking forward to in the first of the year, we're going to the DCA sponsored City First Comprehensive Planning Initiative. It's a 2-day workshop so that we can prepare to start doing the master plan for the city. So we will not have to use CPL or another planning firm again. So another, reduction that we have done with regards to professional fees and engineering fees. You see that line item has been reduced significantly because most of the site plan review, if not all, I'd say 92% right now, are paid by the developer. So those engineering fees that are making sure that we are compliant with stormwater and traffic requirements is now paid through a revolving fund that the actual developer pays for. So we are no longer footing the bill for engineering. Also because of the certifications that my team has, and we also have an upcoming workshop again for the erosion and sediment control, we do not have to farm that out either. So Ellie, the new team member, she's starting that. I think we have 9 members of Josh's team that will be taking the class on the 3rd as well, so that'll get the blue card going. So again, because I'm certified through the state to teach these classes, we save at least $200 a head per person being able to. And so the only expense out is the actual binder that we do. Additionally, we're gonna be able to open up this training for 5 additional people, outsiders. So we charge them $175. So we actually end up getting an additional revenue when we teach these classes and offer them to our community. So the couple of items that we were looking at, computers, software. We have a couple of items that, we need some improvements in our area. We did have a request for the E-Plan software. I'm not sure if you guys know exactly what we do right now for our site plan review. We have about 16 projects that are currently in site plan review. So everything that we do is basically paper. So paper and spreadsheets, keeping track of, making sure that we are turning these around in a timely manner. We do about a 3-week turnaround for our reviews. So that's 2 weeks for the engineer, an additional week for staff to do their reviews. So fire marshal, myself, utilities, all of that is reviewed in-house. Stormwater and traffic is paid for out of that revolving fund that I spoke about. So the software for us was the ability to loop in utilities, fire marshal, myself, engineers, and it has, it basically tracks all the projects, and it has the ability for the developer to log in and actually track the progress, see where they are in the permit line, if anything's expiring, new notes, things that they can update in real time. So also it has the availability to the public to track projects as well. So that was the E-Plan soft proposal. And then, you know, yeah, the AC improvements, one of the rooms where the code enforcement and building inspector, it doesn't have AC. So we kind of have to freeze out half the office to get them cooler, so we're just putting in, trying to get one of those AC units that they have out by finance in the conference room. So yeah, we were able to reduce our budget significantly with all the new things that we have put in place.
But I reminded Mayor and council that Kim and I do not have heating or air either, so we all suffer. So it's, we'll get through it. We try to stay hydrated and wrap up during the winter.
Well, we can switch.
So, again, council, this is one of those that I think even the software, the evolution of these department requests were submitted to staff for us to look at preliminary budgets kind of a little before, so we could talk to y'all at the end of September, walking through the millage rate discussion. And again, it was one of those that Mary was able to talk to the vendor, and that $110,000 that's reflected in this is actually about a $40,000 expense request. But nonetheless, it still is something that I didn't feel as though it was prudent to fund when I know that there are other capital needs, and you know, how do you choose? And again, just to kind of reiterate, looking at just the general fund totality of the department request, it was $9.77 million. So those are not extravagant expense requests. What you've heard thus far seems to be very reasonable. But again, working off of a revenue of $7.3 million, that is why you see a reduction. Because you hear the needs, it's 9.7, you have revenue, once again, 5.2 million of that is essentially outside of our control. So going into DDA, we alluded to it earlier. This is a component unit of the city, meaning they do have a reflection in our budget. However, the $76,000 or so dollars is a combined, and you'll see in a moment the hotel motel budget allocation from that, along with donations. Lindsay, is there anything I misspoke on that?
No, you're good.
I told her I sat over here so she wouldn't kick me. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Lindsay kind of talk a little bit about, I don't know if she wants, how far back she wants to talk about. This is something that, as a finance professional and even as a city management team, we're very, very excited about this. Debt service.
Yes. So as you can, well, I don't know what you'll see, so I'm seeing something different. But, so over the past few years, it has been a goal to reduce some of our debt service. So in 2022, we had $333,000 worth of debt. We're currently down to $53,000 in debt. So which is just one item. Fire truck, that's okay. Saves lives. Fire. But, so, we're proud about that we have gotten our debt down. It does leave room if we do need to go back out and borrow money or whatnot. We have that ability because we have reduced our debt.
And so the experience I've had with, you know, city management and finance is there's always this tug and pull of where I'm not adverse to debt just because there are capital needs that no jurisdiction can always fulfill. So similarly to very few people, and those who can, I admire them, can just go pay cash for a car or a home. So similarly to the way we operate, there are certain things that I would consider that if you're going to go into debt, it's at least something that you kind of make a wise decision and you weigh all options. So you'll hear a little bit about this in just a moment, and that's why I want y'all just to remember that number, feel good about it right now, and then you'll hear something an idea in a little bit.
Lindsay, what year, how far, I'm sorry, you said we were at 300,000, we were in debt, and then, how many years ago was that?
That was 2022.
Thank you.
So this is the hotel motel fund. I call it kind of a pass-through of sorts. This is where monies are derived to help with our partner, to fund some activities to the chamber. There's a yellow arrow that is allocated there. Additionally, you'll see the transfer from the hotel motel to the general fund to DEA. So that's how when you talk about revenue coming from a hotel motel, travelers coming in, visiting, shopping, staying, it does benefit all facets of our community, from our chamber to our downtown development authority.
Ernie, can I make a comment for the benefit of the public?
Yes, sir.
Just so the public is aware, that $60,000 going to the chamber is required to go to the chamber by law. That's one of the criteria for being able to collect hotel motel tax, is that you give monies for tourism and things similar to tourism that is not directly connected to the city. And so we're required by law to get, it could be some other organization other than the chamber, but since the charter for hotel motel tax in both Pickens County and in Jasper, we've chosen the chamber as our DMO, I think it's designated marketing organization. And then we retain a small amount of funds that we use for economic development purposes, and that is unrestricted. So just to comment on how that works.
Yes. And to that point, you will see either December meeting or January meeting, the annual agreement with the chamber that we will be presenting to you all.
There's also a small amount of opportunity where we could possibly collect a little bit more of that. And again, that's an end user tax. Those are people that don't live here for the most part that we're collecting tax from. The only issue with the potential additional 2%, we get 6% now, that would require an act of legislature. And hopefully we'll be looking at maybe doing that. It's too late to do it this coming year, but maybe in 2026 we can reconsider that.
Thanks. And kind of walking through the 2014 SPLOST, that's essentially going to be zeroed out. I think Kim was telling me that there's some additional invoices that have come through for the Pioneer Road project. So not going to spend a whole lot of time on this particular one because there's really nothing much left to expend out of it. Any remaining monies, whether it's $50,000 or $100,000, would go towards the match required for the sidewalk monies. Which leads us to the 2020 SPLOST, and this is obviously a worksheet. You saw the amended and kind of been communicating. I just feel as though that it's important to look at. We're getting close to that June 2026. So for purposes of January 1, looking at about another 18 months. And again, going back to the 2019 referendum, which approved the 2020 SPLOST, there were initiatives included that we have encumbered the money to follow through with the referendum for the park, City Park. Obviously this month we approved the playground that is ordered to kind of finish up that. There are some additional monies allocated, $330,000 from SPLOST to go towards a grant match. I think it's a wise decision to encumber $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, whatever it may be, to leverage against $1 million+ that GDOT has allocated for sidewalk.
Yes, that particular grant is the $2.2 million grant that we do sidewalk along North Main Street from Chambers up through Revolution Church, essentially. very close to the city limit sign. And so we do have a 20% match on that project. You'll recall the original grant was for 1.6 million, and so that 330 that we had allocated was our match. They bumped that number up to $2.2 million for the award, which increased our matching requirement by about $120,000.
So I will say, you've heard me kind of talk about strategically how this particular meeting, this budget hearing, could have been played out differently with respect to this slide if T-Splost had have passed. That is an additional source of revenue that could have opened up opportunities for the advancements of certain initiatives, sidewalks, stormwater, streets. We could have essentially unencumbered that money to then go towards any sort of public safety needs or anything else, capital needs that is relevant and pertinent through the referendum, which, if you recall, was parks, public safety, street, roads, bridges, culverts, sidewalks, etc. So once again, from the time that we've kind of continued to look at ways to provide you all with options, I'm not going to even pretend to admit that this was an idea that was originated through me. So I want to make sure that I kind of turn it over to Lindsay to kind of talk about a possible option. Nothing that has to be done today or even December 2nd, but I think it will provide an option for utilizing some cash.
Thank you. So as y'all recall, when council approved to purchase the newer fire truck coming from the fire department, this fiscal year, October 2025?
Hopefully.
Okay, so we decided then, or council decided then, that we would start allocating $30,000 into a restricted cash account to pay for this fire truck, so we wouldn't have a loan on it. So, but to free up some cash, we have been looking at some different options for, when the fire truck does come in, plus there's additional equipment that we're gonna purchase out of SPLOST as well. We were looking at some loans. We reached out to Georgia Municipal Association, which does a lot of financing for vehicles and equipment and stuff for municipalities. And they go for, usually 10 years is their loan max for vehicles. So when you're looking at a $650,000 purchase for a fire truck, your monthly payment would be about $6,800. You don't have to finance the full amount. You could finance half of it. You could finance a fourth of it. So you could be anywhere from $1,750 a month to $6,800 a month. And that was just an option that we've just looked at to see if we needed to free up some more cash to go towards some of the other capital projects that's requested by police and fire, because that's one thing that's very important to know is this 2020 SPLOST account has benefited our public safety and our parks tremendously. You see a lot of the new police vehicles. We've purchased 2 fire engines from the SPLOST account, and it's all to benefit our community. And we have parks, we have new playground equipment, we have several things. So I just want that to be stressed that this account, or SPLOST, is very important for our community. And but that's another option. We could just free up some of the cash if we needed to. We can look at it later. Interest rates may get better. Hopefully they won't get worse, so.
So one of the reasons we want to bring the concept up during the budget public hearing was such that I feel like we would make some slight modifications based on your direction for the December 2nd meeting. However, knowing that as the first quarter of next year kind of got into it, whether or not there's a drop in some interest rates that then makes it more attractive, that if we know that $53,000 remaining on the general fund debt, if we were to add another $50,000 or so and spread that out over 10 years, granted, that's something that we would have to just budget for. However, it does allow us to tap into some additional monies for matching grants, for doing some public safety, for doing some things at the parks. Once again, the way that there's restricted cash flows, it's not as if we can go purchase a street sweeper. So again, The way that some of these restrictive accounts are, when we say public safety, it's because that was the referendum language relative to the voters voting for these monies to be allocated and spent in that manner. So, it's not anything that is adversarial, it's just, well, there is no money. So when you see a new police vehicle, right now, we are down a police vehicle. Chief and I talked and the team, and we essentially determined that there was a Explorer that had essentially seen better days, and instead of continuing to sink more money into it, they just towed it back over here, and we're gonna try to surplus it out. But there is a need for a new vehicle, and as you heard the chief say, that's $48,000 plus equipment. We could salvage maybe some of it, but not all. It wasn't totaled, it was just the engine blew, it had a gasket, and it was an older 8-year-old vehicle or so.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, it's one of those that when he asked me, I said, well, we don't have any options at this moment. Just want to throw it out there for you. And again, nothing that you have to definitively say yay or nay. It wasn't something that we were going to try to cram down by the December 2nd meeting, since we don't have any sort of terms available. But we didn't want it to seem bleak, that when you hear, well, we've got 9-point-something million worth of needs, and we'll go through the capital, general fund capital in a moment. It's about, I think, 700 or so needs. We can't do it all, but we do have some options to explore. So I'll kind of end the general fund, and we'll transition into the enterprise, water sewer.
Okay. Thank you again. So for the water sewer fund for fiscal year 2025, it's a $7,973,500 budget. That is about $602,000 less than what the original adopted budget for fiscal year 2024, what we are in now. So, next slide. Okay. So this picture, and it, granted, is a little difficult to tell some of the colors on here, but what it does represent, there has been some conversation and some communication in the public here recently about the idea of service delivery area. And so I think the two colors that you would be most interested in is the reddish color that kind of is the outlines of the county. That is the agreed upon Pickens County service delivery area for water. The purple, kind of right in the middle, that is the agreed upon City of Jasper service delivery area. And very difficult to see, but it is there. There is, if you follow 515 down, you will see kind of a very light purple, or if you want to call that gray color. That was an attempt to lay the city limits upon that. This is significantly larger than what the city limits are. We understand that. Service delivery area, though, is something that has been agreed to, been discussed and agreed to by the city and the county several years ago, and that is before my time. So.
And again, just to kind of clarify, because I know it gets confusing, and so we've tried to hopefully give an image that can at least, this area here is the city limits, essentially 4,800 residents. And then in the purple area, not the entire purple area is got water service, but how many customers do we serve?
About 6,100.
Okay, which translates into about 16,000 people.
That is correct.
So when you look at it in terms of the service area, it is something that, again, I think for the most part, all of us were not here 20, 30 years ago, but it is something that is our reality, and it is something that we do have to contend with. Again, going into the next several slides with respect to revenue versus expenses, The real department requested needs is 9.5 million, but there's only so much revenue that can help with that, a little less than 8 million.
So the lion's share of revenue is water and sewer receipts, that is the rates. You will see at the very top, we are still proposing about $626,000 worth of fund balance in order to balance this budget. There are smaller.
That's enterprise fund, right?
This is enterprise
Okay,
fund,
just-
yes,
for
separate from general
clarification.
fund. That is correct, thank you.
How much did you say on, fund balance?
$626,000, yes ma'am. There are, you see multiple lines in here, and those are smaller things, you know, we have accepted leachate in the past for processing. That is not something that we are currently doing right now with the wastewater plant under expansion. With the construction, it's just not feasible to take on some of the things that we would normally accept from our haulers and from the landfill. But those are revenue lines that could come back. Next page, thank you. So we are split into 2 treatment plants. So there is a water pollution control plant budget. There's a water treatment plant budget. This is the sewer maintenance budget, which is essentially our collection system, including all of our lift stations and all of the piping that makes up the collection system, getting it to the treatment plant. And then you will see later on another slide, there is a water distribution budget, and that is essentially the same thing. Once the treatment plant processes the water, gets it clean and ready to go out, it goes out through the distribution system. There was a request, and we do split things essentially 50-50 between sewer maintenance and between water distribution, because that is the same group of folks that are working on both systems. We do not have individual departments with folks that are specialized in just collections working on this, or just on our water side working on something. This is the same group of people. We currently have 2 3-person crews out there that are performing water distribution, line maintenance work, the sewer collections work. We have someone that does pretty much dedicated sewer maintenance work, and that is our lift station whisperer that works along with Charles to make sure that things are running properly and not overflowing, because that is not a good thing. There was a request for additional personnel in order to address many of the service issues that we are having, that the aging infrastructure is requiring more preventative maintenance, more basically fixes and corrections. There was a request for additional personnel, which you will see, it is not in there. We simply do not have the budget for that. I think something very important to point out is roughly the middle of the page. And again, I mentioned that we split these budgets between sewer maintenance and between water distribution. And that is creating the new expense line, which is contract labor. The city has always used contract labor, folks like T-Stanco, other contractors, for jobs that are either larger than what we can handle ourselves in-house, and that is in terms of equipment or personnel, or for emergency repairs. This year alone, with one of the contractors, we have spent $178,000. There are other contractors that we are working with as well. That has essentially just come out of operating fund, and so with the creation of this contract labor work order, it is our attempt to actually put a dollar amount with what it is that we're spending on repairs, emergencies and things like that. That number is going to get higher every year until we get some of our older lines replaced, we get some new systems in place, things that we are working on through the GFA projects that we have obtained. Our system is only getting older. So this contract labor line item is for that kind of work. If you go down towards the bottom, the capital purchases, we will talk about that actually on a further slide, so if we can maybe just hold that thought a bit. Let's see here. The next line is the wastewater plant, the water pollution control plant. If you were at the November 4th council meeting, then you heard me present a proposal from Infomark, which is the contract labor company that has been assisting us with work out at our treatment plants because we had lost our Class 1 operator. We split our expenses between the wastewater plant and the water plant similarly to the way that we split them between collections and distribution. It's a halvesies type of balance between the two. The Infomark agreement that was passed by council was roughly $1.6 million for annual costs. That was additional personnel, additional operators running the plants. That was for maintenance work that they would be carrying out for us, the management of the plants, but the city retaining the permits and retaining the assets. So they are still city-owned plants. It is still city-owned permits. It's just we have a group in there that is equipped to handle the work on a more efficient basis than what we have been able to do. So.
And if I could just interject, again, the adopted budget in 2024 was 1.4 million, and what we are looking at this moment, as Kim illustrated, was 1,050,000. So again, we're trying to look at efficient ways to, not just in our general fund, but in our enterprise.
So we're at water administration, so this, I think Mr. Douglas had explained, this does have halves of some salaries. That would be city manager, assistant city manager, our city clerk, HR director, and who was the other person? Oh, yes, Lindsay is in there as well. So.
And the front staff is 80%.
And front staff, thank you. So there are no capital projects there. The next line, which is utility development. This was actually the department that Josh was in before he moved to our public works department, handling some of the locating aspects that we are required to comply with Georgia 811. That was a meter reader that was out cutting on, cutting off, doing emergency work, things like that, as well as inspection. And so we have decreased that amount, but that position will continue because, quite frankly, we need a dedicated locator. We need someone that can do inspections of all of this development work to ensure that it is being installed correctly and that we're not going to be left holding the bag in the future. So we're at water treatment plant. Again, this has the other half of the Infomark agreement about halfway down. And so there is an overall reduction, albeit a small one on this budget, but about $40,000. And then if you slip at the last page, which is water distribution, again, that's halved with sewer maintenance. That has the other half of that work order for contract labor. Things that we know we are going to be spending on fixing our system and addressing preventative maintenance items. So half of it here, half of it with sewer maintenance. As Brandon had mentioned, water fleet, this is also the same person that is doing our streets fleet and taking care of the city. It is halved between these two funds, enterprise and general fund. And as I had mentioned before when we were talking about streets, our mechanic does a fabulous job of keeping us running and on the streets. He has been able to maintain several pieces of equipment, get several things running, and the preventative maintenance work that he is able to do is a lifesaver. With sanitation, that is our trash collection pickup. I think the important part to note on there is that this has to be augmented by the enterprise fund, by water fund, because it does not currently meet budget. That is an annual occurrence that has happened and will probably continue to happen.
But much decreased since we,
It is much decreased. And that is through some activity that council had taken over the last couple of years by bringing in a partner like Waste Pro to take care of our residential trash collection, where we still retain the customer service aspect of that. And then last year, I think most of you will recall that we had ended the commercial trash collection aspect other than our central business district downtown. So we are collecting that trash, we are collecting parks and facilities and things like that that are city owned, but that is what we have.
I think that's in the neighborhood of $250,000, we reduced that or something like that.
The reduction, yeah, that's close. So municipal court.
And this is just, again, Lindsay and I have spoken about this, and in future years, this will probably be less of a fund because as a component of the general fund, you'll see where this is just kind of reflected of any of the fines and forfeitures to help offset any sort of cost allocation to use of the jail and then transfer into the general fund. So earlier when you saw the revenue line in the 300, you'll see where at the very bottom of the expenditure, the transfer to general. So I'm accustomed with a prior stint in the municipality of you just kind of have that all in your general fund anyway from a revenue expenditure. So general fund, you'll recall that the 2024 budget as adopted did have express needs for capital purchases. We amended the budget. We essentially said we're going to try to illustrate kind of how break these out. For all intents and purposes, when I say this tongue in cheek, the team did a really good job of going ahead and purchasing what was needed. They did not wait. So in terms of your capital outlay budgets, whether it's general fund or whether it's your enterprise, it's considered a perpetual account, meaning it goes from year to year. Because with a capital expense and an asset, it is not something that you just say, well, from a department budget, we're going to zero out each year. It's a perpetual fund. So the fortunate part is they were able to get what they needed. The unfortunate part is there is no available funding for 2025. So that just means that, hey, you got what you needed, and unless council sees otherwise, there is no carryover money from a perpetual perspective. Now, it's going to get totally confusing because I got happy with the red circle. So on the next slide, ignore the red circle, because again, this is the enterprise capital outlay, and again, it's a perpetual account. The way that capital expenses are, you just don't go and buy something, engineer it, labor, so it takes a little while longer. So, Kim, if you want to elaborate on the 24 and then the 25 needs.
Sure. So at the budget amendment earlier this summer, we had created a perpetual, or what I call a carryover fund. And so you are not losing that money if you cannot complete it. Utility projects are typically longer than the period of 1 year, especially if you have something that is ongoing. You do need that need to be able to carry over the funds, potentially even augment the funds for the next year as additional needs arise. We had set forth several projects, and Lindsay has been working on reconciling because we have been spending as well. We have been working on acquiring additional pumps so that we have lift station upgrades, we have pumps and everything that are new, we have some additional pumps. There were some projects that were identified in June as needing to be done, and we have those that we are trying to actually incorporate them into the JIFA projects, both for the water plant upgrades. There was an identified need to spend some money with our clear wells at the water plant. Instead of using that budget, we are trying to work that into the budget that is with the water treatment plant, if at all possible, to free that money up for something else. Similarly, we had a project that we had identified on the sewer collection side, and we are trying to move that into the sewer rehab project that is for JIFA, to where we can free that money up as well to be used for two identified projects that we have spoken with you about before, and that is work at the EQ pond at the wastewater treatment plant, which does need some dredging, as well as dredging at our water intake, where we actually have our source water withdrawal permit at the intake on Long Swamp Creek. Does need to be dredged. There is some emergency spillway repair that remains from, I believe, 2021, maybe the spring, when the incident that happened at the bridge, the water main blew out, we had work there, the rock slide. There is some dredging work that has to be done there, and so we are using the money that we have set aside in this perpetual or carryover fund and allocating it as best we can, being mindful of what we have and the needs that continue to arise.
So I appreciate y'all, and what I've learned is when you do PowerPoints, a lot of times when people see this and finally, people get excited because they know, hey, it's probably over. And I thought about adding this slide in about 20 slides ago, just to kind of give a false sense of, hey, we're about to be done. But, finance people, they speak in numbers. I pretend to be a finance person, but I speak in words. So to me, budget is a set of assumptions of how much money will come in and an estimation of the needed expending of said monies that are assumed to materialize. Forecasting numbers predicated on historical events is a method that involves recognizing the internal and external variables that exist within an organizational environment. It is fundamental that tangible actions are taken to ensure that budgets are evaluated regularly and consistently to ensure that corrective actions are taken if needed to maintain the viability and sustainability of an organization. I think it's important to keep that in mind when you're dealing with budgets, especially when there's a lot of variables that we cannot necessarily control. So again, it's one of those, you'll hear some form of variation of that statement periodically permeate through me or through others, because I think it is important to recognize that a budget is not set and forget it. So with that.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging out with us. At this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up for public hearing for the public to step forward up to the podium. If you'll state your name and your address. If you have questions or comments about what you've seen this evening, we would love to hear from you. Again, thank you for hanging out with us. I know that took a minute to get through it. We lost some people, Mr. Tony.
We did.
So if you'd like to speak, come on up to the podium. If you'll just state your name and address, anyone.
Tony Davis, 400 Georgiana Street. I know this is not a back and forth, it's a public hearing, but can I ask her the name of the company that's overseeing the water and sewage? Infomart?
Yes. Infomart, yes.
How do you spell that? If you don't
It's
mind.
INFRAMARK.
My next question is, would there ever be an opportunity for the public to have a back and forth, to ask questions and get questions answered? Would we ever have that kind of forum?
I believe so. Town halls are something we've not historically done, but I believe that there's a time and place where yes.
Could we, what do we need to do as citizens to request that? Because there's a lot of questions we have.
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll take a note. What we can start doing is reaching out. We know how to get in touch with you. But we can start sharing on social media if council and administration want to have a town hall, open it up to the public to come in. We've done it a few times here in the chambers and opened it up and then basically had a general discussion.
Yes, I think it's much needed. Some of the questions that I do have is that the expenditures were $7.2 million, and I think the general fund was right around that same amount. But at the same time, you also stated that there's $5.2 million that you have absolutely no control over. That seems to me to be leading toward the unrealized revenue that brought about the tax increase that we just went through. Are we gonna get to the end of next year and say, okay, we expected this to happen, but it didn't happen, so in order for us to cover this, we're again gonna have to propose a millage rate increase. Because 5.2 million of the budget you're talking about, you have no control over. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a freeze on water and sewer hookups inside the city limits, correct, until when?
That suspension's for 1 year.
When is that up?
Mr. Douglas or Ms. Golder, do you know when that date is?
It's September.
September?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't know what talking.
Okay, that's fine. So we understand that there's not gonna be, that's going to cause problems as far as new construction and new building inside the city limits. And it seems that most of it is going toward high-density housing in the west end. And we're talking complexes that are bringing in 100 families at a time. And we already have such water and sewer issues that it's the discussion of every meeting. I had an inside source that told me that up to almost 50% of the city's water is being lost due to waste and flushing. That's a big number. The county's is 10%. That's a big number to be wasting. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. Maybe it's the system that we have is dilapidated. We need to do the work to fix it. We've got to start focusing on fixing the infrastructure that we have now that's failing us and failing the citizens and costing us all money. We've got to address that some way. The next thing is, I don't even know how to bring it up, but this whole amphitheater situation. I know there's a grant, but with that grant comes a match that are tax dollars. And if I'm not mistaken, it's something like 2 million, so we'll have to match $1 million. And then if I'm not mistaken, also, we have to put up and be responsible for the first $1 million till this thing's completed before they pay us. Is that
Do
correct?
you mind if I address that?
So I'm writing these things down. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is let Mr. Tony speak and then we can certainly address and answer some of these questions at the end. Mr. Tony, go ahead.
And then, so we know there's no license and permits going on until September. One thing I would like to ask, I don't want to start doing open records requests for every question we have. So we have a mayor, a city manager, and a city manager's assistant. We would like to see a job description of what all of that, what each person is responsible for. And where they're being utilized and how they're benefiting us in those positions, if that's possible. Not saying I'm not criticizing anybody, we just want to know as the public what that looks like. And then I heard tonight about sidewalks going all the way to Revolution Church, right? Is that another grant?
We'll get to it.
I want to answer.
It's just happening, yes.
Maybe I should just call you. But with those grants, even if we say, we get this grant and then the other portion of it's no tax dollars involved, well, there's no free money, we all know that. We pay taxes, it's either at a state level or a federal level that we'll get back and use in the city. It's all tax dollars, they're not just giving us free money. And these are things that we're, as citizens, we're not even aware that it's going on. I mean, maybe we've been dropping the ball as far as getting involved, but we're spending millions on things that, we're talking about a $2 million amphitheater with a bathroom that's a half a mile away that we just paid over $500,000 for. So there's gonna have to be more bathrooms, more water, more sewer to accommodate that. And we're getting really concerned that if you've already stated here today that you have no control over 5.2 million of the proposed budget, then we're really scared what the end of the year is gonna look like. Is that burden, if you fall short, gonna once again be placed on the shoulders of the city, the people who live here? Because we can't keep doing it. So we would love to have an open forum where we can ask and get answers. It could be really respectful. And we respect you guys, and we appreciate what you do, but there's things that are concerning us, and we really want to be able to sit down and talk.
That's your
Okay.
list?
Huh?
Is that your list?
Yeah, that's part of it. There's so much more, but.
All right, if you want to rest, I'm gonna start going through the list. I'm gonna run this a little differently. It's
Okay.
not a back and forth, but you had a list of questions, and so I wanna make sure we give you a good answer here, just a brief answer, and then I'll go to the next person for some questions, unless you've got more you want to cover first.
I'm gonna stop right there.
Okay, all right, the first thing was the 7.2 versus the 5.2. Mr. Davis or Ms. Golder, if you can explain the difference. You are correct in the 5.2 having no control. Could you go to the graph that is a pie? So yes, sir, this is what you were looking at, and again, this will be available, we'll make it available to the public, either a copy, hard copy or on the website. The 30% in orange is the property real estate. Sales and use tax is the blue, it's the 28%. So there's very little control over anything blue or any of the other colors. What we do have control over, Mr. Douglas, Ms. Golder, or Ms. Williams, correct me if I'm wrong, what we do have control over as far as it being a consistent is that orange area.
Which is property tax?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Mayor,
That's what
just
scares me.
just for a point of reference, so you heard me say that 35% is kind of the sweet spot in local jurisdictions. You're never going to fund your general fund services purely on property tax. We collect a little over $2 million in property tax. That was with the millage rate increase. The county's 7+ mill is about 40% of theirs. So ours went from 25% to 30%. The idea is taking a more fiscally conservative approach with respect to revenues coming in. What we have estimated is these numbers, the yellow is what we know, the green is pretty well what we know.
Based on history.
Based on historical, because what we have to do is we have to forecast and look at historical numbers. Then, in terms of the buildings, understanding that we are not going to collect a huge sum of money from building permits because of the temporary suspension of water sewer connections, which is deeply tied to persons wanting to come in, get a building permit, they pay. We're only estimating $100,000 worth of revenue. If that does not happen, it is not millions of dollars that we're not collecting. It is $100,000 that we're budgeting that if does not happen, it would not be good you never want to lose, but we are taking a more fiscally conservative approach with estimating what? With respect to even property tax, recognizing that when we were walking through the millage rate discussions, we had educated that forecasting 2025, 2026, and 2027 in terms of knowing that there was going to be a referendum that the state put out for capping property taxes on residential properties. That was
the
passed.
floating homestead exemption. I don't remember the actual number.
That was passed, and it's based upon something that the state next year is going to assign. We estimated that 26 and 27, that most likely the consumer price index or whatever inflationary number that the state dictates, we're estimating a conservative 3%. So if for some reason it comes in at 2.5%, 3%, 1.5%, we're not overestimating in 26 or 27. So when we were looking at the millage rate and the option of the 1.5 mills, that was based upon the immediate need of 2025, trying to reduce the amount that we would have to use from our savings account, which at this point is about a couple of $100,000. And in 2024, we had already budgeted about $214,000 use of fund balance. So when it's all said and done, if we're within that $200,000 to $300,000 worth of using of our savings, that is consistent with previous, even with some of the revenue not being realized. With respect to, I know Kim wanted to talk about it, but I'm just going to kind of go through, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Are you still on 7252 or are you on to something different?
I was going to move on because, once again, that is just something that is a reality in any organization.
Sure.
In 19 years.
What I wanted to cover was the mill increase assisted in that orange area of the pie, going from 25% up to 30. So it does assist us in overall budgeting, and it gets us closer to an area, as Mr. Douglas said, the county's in the 40% range, we're in the 30% range. It's unhealthy to have any certain area cover too much, because if that one area falls, then we're in trouble. So that's actually a pretty healthy number. Mr. Douglas, the next thing I had down was water sewer suspension. If we could explain, there is a water sewer suspension, how that works. Because there are still things being worked on in the city.
Yeah, I think it is important to understand that, Mary talked about, we have projects that are under construction right now or in varying stages of site plan review. There are commitments that the city had agreed to, and so there are projects. Rolling Meadows is a good example, the project that's on Philadelphia Road between 515 and Talking Rock, or Old 5, I guess. That project has allotted capacity through an EPD permit. And so they are actively pulling building permits. That's cost of construction and building permit revenue that is coming in and will continue to come in over the next 3 years. We have other projects that are either under construction right now where we have factored in, okay, we know that it's coming. It's already in construction, or they are so darn close to pulling a building permit right now that we need to honor those requests. And so it's not really a total stop of building permits at all. I would say, if anything, we've been a little busier than probably we anticipated. It was more designed, though, towards people who do not have site plans at all right now, just making sure that they understand we have multiple GFA projects going on right now. We have a USDA project going on to expand the wastewater treatment plant that is almost finished.
So Kim, explain what that means to the public. So he talked about infrastructure rehabilitation. That's exactly what those GFA projects are.
Yeah, I was about to.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so, we have identified, we have issues. Everyone knows that we have issues within our infrastructure. the GFA projects, when I refer to them as GFA, it is just Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, thank you, I can never remember the letters. That is loans, very, very low interest loans that have a conservation aspect to them that decreases the percentage rate of that loan even more when you are trying to actively fix portions of your system that are either letting water out or, they're designed to conserve water and things. So all of our utility projects right now that are being funded by GFA, there's about $8 million worth of projects, are under those extremely low interest loans. One of them I mentioned earlier, and that is upgrades at the water treatment plant. Another one is improvements and rehab within our distribution system. So that is the water system that is sending water out into the world to serve our customers. We are trying to strengthen our interconnects with our community partners, the neighboring communities that we purchase water from. We have identified areas that we've got to do something about this. There are undersized mains where we have some pressure issues. There are not looped feeds where you really need to have that in order to be able to have the flow, the volume that you need to serve customers. We have two on the wastewater side. One of them is a master sewer lift station. And just for anybody that's not familiar with lift station, what that is the conveyance, the pressurized conveyance of getting wastewater from one point to another. You have either pressure or you have gravity, one or the other. And homes are on gravity systems. It is just naturally, the slope is taking the wastewater from your home or your business to the next point in time to get it onto the plant. We have issues within that system as well. There are places that take on water, which is a horrible thing in sewer systems. You do not want to take groundwater, like rainwater that seeps into the ground and comes into the pipe through holes or through leaky manholes or anything like that, because it has to be sent then to the wastewater treatment plant for treatment. And you're essentially treating water that ought to just be going to a pond and seeping back in naturally through the aquifer or whatever it is that you have, or going to a river or going to a stream and things like that. All of those projects are underway now. It is a huge effort, and it is unfortunately just the beginning of what we're looking at. I agree with you. It's unfortunate that it is all at one time. And that's what it seems like. It is a very daunting task what we have ahead of us, but with the use of our consultants, they are telling us, you need to do this first. You need to take care of something here. You need to do this. And then there are the projects that are following right along behind that. And we continue to look for sources of revenue, grants, mostly very, very, very low interest loans to help fund these projects, so that we can continue to tighten up our system and allow people to be, to have the service that they need.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Real quick, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
So I saw the county department inside the city helping fix leaks.
Yes, sir.
The county buys water from Calhoun at $2.10 per thousand. They sell it to the city for what they pay for. Then the city distributes that to people who are outside the city limits but on city water. Then the city drastically raised their water rates. Now we're in a battle with the county for that purpose when we could actually lean on them to help us.
All right, so I'll touch base on that in just a bit.
Okay.
Add it to the bottom of the list. What I want to take away from that though is the $8 million in GFA is the start. It's the first big milestone in fixing the infrastructure we're talking about, where you mentioned the 50% loss to flushing. I I know y'all just did ISO, we're not flushing 50%.
No, I know, a lot of it's
Yeah.
leaks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
There's a combination of
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and, you know, flushing, I mean, you hope that it doesn't have to be used for fires, but it's there
Yep.
for emergency situations as well. There is some loss through theft, too.
theft.
Yes, sir.
so it's kind of multifaceted on that part. Did you have something to add to that one?
Well, what I wanted to kind of bring up, if you wanted to, in terms of, not to, I think it's a great transition, that the question also was the hierarchy or the structure. I think Ms. Goldner has provided a little bit of a job description.
Yeah,
She's,
somewhat.
so with all due respect, the approach that I take as a city manager is we have about $20 million combined budgets to deal with. The chief of police has an assistant police chief for that department that is second in command. The fire chief has an assistant fire chief, which is second in command. Ms. Goldner is the assistant city manager for the city, not a department, but the city. She is second in control. So that in and of itself is the most succinct way of saying job descriptions. Relative to the chief elected position as the mayor, it is not a paid position because to me,
Full-time salary.
a stipend of $500 is not a paid position. The charter enables the mayor to be the chief elected officer presiding over meetings, breaking a tie, and giving oversight to the city manager and team on a day-to-day in consultation with running the city.
All right, so I want to go to the next thing though, real quick.
Okay.
The next thing was amphitheater, the funding. We talked about the $1 million plus the $1 million match, in the bathrooms. So the bathrooms, that amphitheater, the plans include bathrooms on that end, with the amphitheater. But can we talk about the funding of general fund versus SPLOST dollars for the match?
And Mr. Davis, if you and others would like to look, so again, there's no general fund money. This is only SPLOST money, special purpose local option sales tax, that the voters approved in 2019 for specific projects.
What was the project?
The overview was parks, recreation, public safety, roads, streets, bridges, culverts. And part of what had been identified is what you see on the screen of encumbering, meaning we're setting aside SPLOST money to help match the $1 million grant. So what we're trying to do is be good stewards of what the community had said they wanted, was robust parks, downtown park. Ms. Goldner secured $1 million grant because my experience is $2 million when you're talking about doing land disturbance, bathrooms, performing areas, sodding, does not go very far. So the $2 million, if you can leverage $1 million of money that's going to be given to you, with another $1.4 million is what we've set aside, not from general fund, not from water, but from special purpose local option sales tax. What that spreadsheet shows is a cash flow of each month when we receive money from the special purpose local option sales tax. We are putting that money into that account to help with the construction of that park. With respect to the sidewalks, I'll let Ms. Goldner speak on that, and I'll point you to this area here, which is the encumbering or setting aside of the money to help with the SPLOST money for the sidewalks.
Well,
Before we make that transition real quick, Tony, the big important thing for me to remember on this screen here, so when SPLOST was put on the ballot and the citizens voted for it, the jurisdiction has to come up with verbiage, language to say, okay, voters, you're voting for these things, what are they? And the reason you see the new engine, you see Perot Park, those items match what was on the referendum. So we're bound by the ballot what the citizens wanted us to do, and that's why it's important for us to get a second fire station open, for us to have the new police vehicles. That's what was on that referendum for a vote. And so when we come back to the public in 26 for SPOS,
The county would call it.
if the county calls for another SPOS, we would be able to look at you and say, hey, for your SPOS dollars, that's why on the back of most of his equipment it says paid for by SPOS, is because we want the public to see, hey, this amphitheater came from SPOS. These trucks, those cars, this equipment. So that's part of our commitment to sticking to what was on the ballot. That's our commitment.
I think a lot of the general public was under the assumption, and I talked to a lot of people, that we would maintain and upgrade our existing parks and recreation areas, not create a new park in the downtown business district where we don't have parking now. And
So we'll talk about it. I know our parks are gonna get updated. I know they just passed last month to upgrade the playground at City Park. Things like North Whittington, electrical at Lee Newton, there are improvements going. We just can't do it all at once. It's a slow process.
Can I add something, please?
Yes, sir. And then I'm gonna go to the next thing, which was the charters and duties. Mr. Tony, go ahead. Dr. Parker.
Tony, I don't know if you participated in the Downtown Alliance Committee that in the years between 2016 and 2018.
I did not.
When we had monthly meetings in this room where people from the city came in and talked about what they wanted to see happen because our downtown area was dying. I'm sure you remember the days when there would be no cars on downtown quite a bit of the time, which wasn't all that long ago. During those meetings, we performed a transportation study. This was before I was on council. It was done by Kimley Horn. And that was the guideline for some of the activities and things that we identified specifically as it relates to the green space, which is now what we call Perot Park. There was also key stakeholders came together at that time, and ultimately there was a study done with Clark, Patterson, and Lee about how we could develop that. And we had meetings that were publicly advertised. And that's where the development for the amphitheater came. So that's where the impetus for this came from. And it seems like a long time ago. And that's because these things do take a long, long time. But that was one of the special projects that we'd identified. During the transition of
That
this.
was what, 2016?
2016 it started and then through 2018. During the transition from Commissioner Jones to the current administration, initially we were talking about partnering with the county on the amphitheater and also potentially on some safety equipment. But ultimately, after the election, that never materialized. So initially we thought it was going to be a little bit of a partnership. We recognize that compared to the way things were years ago, our parks had deteriorated. You see how we operate today, and I'm sure you can appreciate, I hope you can, how we operated just 5 or 6 years ago, 8 years ago. It was a lot different. And we're focused on our parks. We're committed to them. And it looks like we're spending all this money on SPOS, but that was the impetus for some of the downtown revitalization that's occurred. And I know there are people that have mixed opinions about how that's occurred and what's occurring. But the downtown area is critical to a community, including the county. I mean, and we want activity down there. And we call this an amphitheater, but it's going to be a place where people can go and spend time, even when they're not events. It's a gathering place downtown. And I'm telling you right now, we're committed to making our parks better.
The next thing, Tony, you mentioned was,
Thank you, Mayor.
yes, sir. The city manager, the assistant city manager, the mayor, the job description, the duties. Number one, our charter does lay out my duties. The charter will lay out, in 2021, the body that was present then and the mayor, the charter was passed by the state. That lists out my duties, and it actually forms what we have, which is a council city manager form of government. Me being the chief elected, the council members being elected, and then having the city administrations, we can certainly provide documentation to you on what we actually do. And that's not an issue at all. I mean, as a citizen, you wanna know what we do and.
Yeah, just a breakdown of how our local city government
that's-
even operates.
That's
How
completely fair. That's fair. The next thing was you mentioned the sidewalks from Chambers up to Revolution Church. Something that really bothers a lot of us in our community is we've had a couple of deaths
Yes.
on that road
Yeah,
and in that vicinity. And this body decided to pursue consistently funding to get people out of the road. We've not done it yet. We have the funding in place, but the actual procedure hasn't taken place. I still see individuals. A few weeks ago, there was a gentleman in a wheelchair coming down Old 5, and I'm just terrified.
yeah.
I believe that's been 3 people that have lost their lives there. We've had a couple more accidents there. That area, this is a direct response to the issues going on. So when we look at things like 515 and people say, why can't the city fix that intersection? Someone died. Well, that's out of our control, but that area is not, and we're gonna do everything we can. There is a match, and so the match, what percentage was it, 20?
It's 20%, yes.
So it was originally for 1.6 million, I believe.
It was 1.6, which required a $330,000 matching, that's the 20%.
And then they came back to us and said, hey, by the way, this is, the state did, they came back and said, we gave you the 1.6 million, you're gonna match it, but it's gonna cost you more, because they looked at their numbers, they constantly looked at the numbers, they said, inflation's cost this much, so your match increased. But what we don't wanna do is give up on that in order to save lives.
So the beginning match was 300,000 and it increased to what?
450,000
Because they went from 1.6 million, the
to
grant,
2.2.
to 2.2. So that grant changed, the total amount changed.
They are absorbing the lion's share of what that match is. It's called the TAP program, Transportation Alternatives through GDOT, and it is geared towards communities that are smaller, to be able to accomplish big things. We were awarded a grant through the TAP program in 2023 as well. That one was for $500,000 to do the engineering on 4 other segments of sidewalk, 2 of which tie into the North Main Street sidewalk that would be coming with the 2024 TAP grant. So
the important part there is that is an area that needs attention. We've had loss of life, and none of us want to see that. So this is certainly, we didn't like seeing the increase, but we understood that that's out of their control. And the last item was the water prices. Can we just discuss briefly, and I don't know if this is Williams, Goldner, or Mr. Douglas, who would like to tackle it, of what the county charges us versus what we charge an end customer?
So I'll just, for, I guess, illustrative purposes, probably be easier just to kind of illustrate. In terms of the differentiation, the city used to do just a flat rate per 1,000. We changed to a tiered structure. Most utilities, whether it's power, water, they have a tiered structure. So this is the counties you'll see up here. And I'll pull up ours momentarily. So
theirs is tiered also?
Theirs is tiered as well. So in terms of what you're looking at here is $538 per 1,000, $645, 3 to 5, 7.53 for 5,000 above. So when you compare that to the city, what we've tried to do is you'll look at the residential water rate.
Now, if I can, Mr. Douglas, the first thing I want to point out to everyone is that the amount, the gallon amount, the actual tiers are different. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's correct. And so you'll see that the inside city limits, you'll see 0 to 2,000, 255 per 1,000. You'll see, oh, that's a little better. See? So you see residential, 255, 340, 423, and $5. So in terms of inside city, this is what it is. Outside city, As illustrated through that map that Ms. Goldner explained, the purple and the red.
The city limits?
No, sir, the service area for
Oh,
water.
sir, yeah, I got you, the red,
So
yeah.
this is what this would apply, this right here. So this, you live in the city limits, this is your rate. The idea being is that the more you use, the higher per thousand that you pay. That is just a standard utility practice with respect to outside city limits. Obviously, you see the 765, but you don't hit that until you're over 10,000 versus if you're a county, you hit it once you're over 5,000. So once again, these are published documents that I pulled from the county's website and our website, if you want to kind of dive a little deeper into it.
So that's available on your website.
And the county's website
Yes,
for there.
And I think my whole point was, are we at a position now that we're damaging relationships with the county government that would be beneficial to us to not do that?
So I will say this, and Ms. Angela and the Progress does their job, and I appreciate them, and they are good people. Sometimes verbiage is misleading. The chairman and I have spoken many times, Mr. Douglas has spoken to the chairman of the county many times. There is no animosity or hatred or war battle going on. As a matter of fact, as soon as the headline hit, we started calling each other and talking to each other. That was sort of misleading, and I hate that for our community, because what I don't want to do is sow an idea of discord when there's truly not an idea of discord. Mr. Douglas talked to the chairman.
I explained to the chairman, his budget meeting was Monday evening. He knew that our budget meeting was tonight. I did not give him this PowerPoint, but I essentially told him how I was approaching it, because I do know that there has been interest going from the millage rate discussion, which is a general fund, only affects taxpayer city residents.
Yeah.
But because of the implementation of the new water rate structure, the outside the city limits, but on city water, those customers were expressing themselves to the county, I believe.
Because they're a county resident.
Part of what we've been discussing is when you look at the rate sheet relative to what, if they were on the county water versus the city's water on the outside city limits,
Yes.
I do not think that it's drastically different. Matter of fact, if you're paying $7 plus per thousand in the county at 5,000 or above, you do not hit the $7 mark on the city's water until you hit over 10,000 gallons.
So ours is less punitive on that measure. But I do want to say, again, I appreciate everyone's role in our community. The Progress plays a huge role. That is our legal organ. Those are our friends and our neighbors. Unfortunately, sometimes it's like a text. You can read the tone of the text the completely wrong way. Sometimes headlines can be misleading. And as far as I'm aware in council, there's not been a huge argument, blow up, battle created. Are there discussions around what does service delivery look like? And of course, that's always an ongoing topic. And that's something that this body will have to work with the county on when the time is right for that area, wherever. Can you pull up that map of the purple? Sorry. There you go. So service delivery is that purple area, and you see the light gray in it. Well, the light gray are citizens in the city limits who pay city taxes. The purple area are county residents that are serviced through city services for water. And so if that, when that time comes and we start renegotiating, the areas may shift and change. But when you get down to the numbers, sometimes it can be confusing, because where we say 0 to 2,000 gallons, the county's first bracket could be 0 to 3,000 gallons.
Right.
But then, as Mr. Douglas said, when you're paying over $7 a gallon in the counties, when you get 5,000, you don't pay $7 a gallon until you hit 10,000 in the city. So there's a trade-off. But I certainly want to make sure you're aware that there's no big blow-up.
Yeah, I just don't want to see us start paying legal expenses for a battle with, and I know they help the city when it comes to the water situation that we're facing.
And I
Yes.
believe that goes both ways.
Yes, and I would like to ask
City,
the
city workers also help in the county.
police chief.
There's a good relationship.
Yeah, I believe. You were talking about evidence processing
Custodian.
and creating a position for that. Who does that currently? Would that be CID or?
Our administrative captain, Andrew Cochran.
So what happens there, Tony, is as we progress as a city and the department, the idea is to segregate duties for clarity and legal purposes. So when you have an evidence custodian that's going out collecting evidence, and it's a chain of custody for your evidence, when it comes time for prosecution and court time, and you also look at things like accreditation. You know, as our department grows, we want them to meet state, accreditation, and then CLEO one day, and those are big, huge, lofty goals. But the chief's idea is a forward-thinking process of best practice.
Right.
What's the best way that a modern police department operates? So individuals are professionals in their fields. But that could be a civilian position. That does not have to be a sworn police officer.
And if I can,
Yes.
Yeah,
that is common practice in most police departments, that is a civilian role. Because you are dealing with, they're gonna be there 5 days a week, they can answer any, people come in, need evidence, returning evidence, anything like that. They're always gonna be there. This position will also assist with municipal court at the time, if they presenting evidence, or superior court for that matter, for any cases. Which at that time, don't take an officer off the street or take a captain out of his role when he's got several other things going on. So it is a good asset for us.
It's a professional growing pain.
Yes.
Truly. All right.
yeah, I was just curious as to how that would be.
Yes, sir.
I thank you all for your time. The only other thing is at some point when we do have a sit down, if somebody could explain this Johnny Weaver layout of the city limits to me, I would much appreciate
We
it.
will gladly explain the city of Jasper's areas of service.
Talking
and
about
our-
post office is in the Jasper city limits.
Yes, sir. I don't know what year that happened, but we'll connect.
But-
All right. Mr. Tony, thank you. I wanted to be cognizant of everyone else in attendance, so does anyone else want to speak? If you'll come forward real quick to the podium and just state your name and your address, we want to hear from you. because you-
I know it's late, so I'm gonna be as succinct as possible. Preface, just, Dave Terry, Jasper, I live in Jasper. I'm appreciative of everyone's time. I know, and efforts, serving the community. It's a thankless job at times. Balancing budgets during a difficult, economy is challenging as well. So, and appreciative of the people, Tony, especially you, who, you're here because you care. You want to make a difference. And when there's a tax increase, the place was packed, and here we are just one session later. And I wish that same level of engagement was here for the tax increase. I also I'm president of the Small Business Development Council. We had our 2025 planning meeting this week. And just two or three takeaways that I think are really relevant that I wanted to share for the council. One, local small businesses in the downtown district are struggling. There were numerous examples at our meeting. One popular restaurant is down 30% this year. One restaurant that just had a grand opening, Station 10, is already having to reduce their hours. Another restaurant, very popular, is moving out of the downtown district to Big Canoe. That's a huge problem. In order to avoid difficult conversations and budget cuts, we have to have economic development. We have to have growth. And without quality growth, we're going to be in this same belt tightening position that we are, and the downtown is struggling. There's no Main Street America position. The DDA has to have an active voice and role in order to shape Jasper. So that was one takeaway, is the struggling nature of the downtown businesses. The other is that, you know, Jasper and Pickens County are developing a reputation of not being pro small business, not being pro entrepreneur, and that's a big concern. One comment at our meeting was, all I hear from the city of Jasper is what we can't do. I want to hear about what we can do. So I wanted to emphasize that point. They feel like there's too many barriers to entry. We've gone too far with too strict of code interpretation. So where can we find common ground, collaboration? And they want to see more of that. And then when it comes to budget and financing, just encourage the council to continue to think creatively. Partnerships with the private sector are what many other small towns are doing to get to that next level, to make sure that they don't have to, have these, budget discussions that are all about, reductions or hanging on to aging equipment one more year. So, thinking creatively around how we can find alternative funding sources is really critical. But that's all I've got. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. Lieutenant Dictator. Yes, ma'am, come on forward.
Hey, my name's Ariane Davis, for Scott Dredd. I was just gonna ask again about the bathroom in the downtown Main Street. And was that something that the majority actually asked for, like the residents?
Is that your only question, or do you want to go through a list first?
Also with that, is that budget could have been used for the fire department or the police department? Because I've heard it was like $500,000, or could be even more, and I'm not sure if I would hear, if we could see the real budget that was used for that. Because that's something that could be used for the police, because we're all about safety in our community, and we're all about adding police and adding more vehicles for them, and the fire department. So I wanted to know if there are any other projects that are coming out of SPLOST that we could just use instead of those development for now, that we could halt and maybe use it for the safety and order. Since that's kind of like the most important thing, I guess.
Sure. So what I'll start with is the bathrooms in downtown. That was a ongoing, long, year after year discussion with the stakeholders. Dr. Proctor and everyone that was here at the time knows not only were citizens asking for a place to use the restroom downtown, our businesses were asking us to please give people a place because they were putting on their doors no public restrooms. It always becomes an issue anytime we hold events. It becomes an issue on a daily basis. For economic development vitality in our downtown area, giving someone a place to gather is something that we want to do to capture time. And when you capture someone's time, you also capture their dollars. They come downtown to spend time. Could the money be used in other areas? So that goes back to what I was talking to Mr. Tony about, is that the money that was allocated didn't come out of SPLOST. But when you look at the referendum of how it was that the voters passed it, we had allocated certain percentages to go to different areas. So we had a certain amount for public safety, we had a certain amount for parks, we had a certain amount for facilities. And so the administration and the council goes through that list and says, okay, looking at what we're bringing in historically, we have to forecast on what the sales tax has brought in before. How are we going to allocate? Well, we get certain percentages and then we start prioritizing what the actual goals are. And that goal for downtown bathrooms had been a long-standing goal of a decade plus that we had to get done in downtown. So when you asked, was it something the majority wanted, and please hear me, I'm not trying to be rude, it's hard to say yes or no to that, because the majority of people I talk to, yes, that's a great thing. But I can't say that that's a majority of the whole population, because what happens is we represent the city of Jasper, but those bathrooms and most of our facilities, all of our parks, all of our roads, all of our services are used by not only city residents, but county residents. And so everyone that lives in our community is visiting these facilities and taking toll on our roads and using our parks. But I don't get to talk to all of them. I don't think any of us do.
Yeah.
But the majority of our conversations when we were in downtown as elected officials, when can we get some darn bathrooms? And that was a task that actually went back when Perot Park started in 2016, that conversation, bathrooms were already coming up then. And about 2017, 2018, it really took off for the bathrooms, but there was an existing aging facility. It used to be a house, which was converted to a doctor's office, which was located on the property where Perot Park is proposed. That facility was initially proposed as a bathroom facility. Through further looking and getting a firm in here, I believe it was an architect or engineer came in and said it just wasn't sound to use. And so then that went to the wayside, engineer. So that went to the wayside, and then an opportunity came up for the city to actually purchase the property where the bathrooms are, capitalize on it at the time for parking. We always hear about parking. So we capitalized on that, and then the opportunity came up for that to be a restroom facility. Once we knew that there was an anchor on the other end, Perot Park, like I told Mr. Tony, also includes bathrooms. So the idea in the long run, sustainability-wise, for economic vitality, if you have people gathering in our central business district and downtown, they'll have opportunities for interest and for spending money and time with facilities at both ends. So our goal is to get people to come spend time there. And you heard from Mr. Dave, who just left. As businesses struggle, one of our opportunities is to have economic development professionals come in. And in this new budget, we have a proposed position that will assist two groups that he mentioned, the public with economic development, and number two, the DDA. And so both of those will benefit from what this administration is putting forward in the new budget. Do you have anything you guys want to add? I feel like I'm
what I would like.
No, it's okay, but I do, sorry, like, let me just add.
So one of the things that I don't want to, because I spent 15 years in a different jurisdiction, the experiences in the majority of locations in Georgia that have a special purpose local option sales tax, a SPLOST, voted by voters of the community, those monies have always been utilized for capital expenditures of public safety, roads, and parks. Jasper had only had a management philosophy, the administration at the time, of previous SPLOST, of only doing road resurfacing. So no parks, no public safety. So in 2020, when we began collecting the money from the voter-approved referendum, we had to take decades of backup of purchases of public safety vehicles, parks improvements, etc. Because when parks were created, there was no associated budget line item to maintain it. So what happens is you'll see that communities that utilize SPLOST money for decades, we are only in the 4-year, technically, getting close to 5-year portion of catching up of 15, 20 years of lost SPLOST funding. So I wanted to make sure that was understood too, because there can be a misconception that the SPLOST money, the 2014, barely talked about, there were only an allowance of the referendum of roads. So there was never any point in time to do parks so when we as a collective body put forth the referendum for the voters to approve, we included those other items because there was a shift in a management philosophy. So just wanted to point that out because I know it can be confusing because, well, why are you just now in this position? It's really only this 2020 SPLOST that we've had the ability to do the stuff.
To cast a net
So
and
there
hit multiple
is a
departments.
percentage just for that, so there's
Yes.
public
Yes, ma'am.
safety and all.
And what's important to notate is, and I know you mentioned police officers, firefighters, SPLOST can't cover any salaries. So
Yes.
it's capital, as you mentioned, only.
Right, and, but, so they, sorry,
No, you're good.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the $500,000 worth of like that bathroom. And is that true?
So I'm not sure what the total budget came to on that.
Is that the percentage of the budget that is in that SPOS for 2020 that was allocated for that line item?
Off the top of my head, I have no idea.
So I'm not sure how to answer that question. I will tell you though, that what we had brought before council was a long process, and the original estimate for a traditional build based on the design that the architect had come up with was approaching $1 million, and we said, ooh,
That made the headline.
that's much. What can we do? What can we do to not spend $1 million? And so the restroom facility that is in place, and I think they were putting the final touches on it this week.
Yeah.
It is a prefab building that is constructed in a factory and basically brought and installed, connected to utilities, and then it has the finishing touches on it. That was estimated, the quote was $397,000 for that bathroom, and that is the fixtures, that's the roof, that's the building structure itself. We had to get the pad ready for it. We've had to add some handicap accessible, the sidewalks and the ramps that are around it. And then we redid the sidewalk that is behind the building on D.D. Carroll as well, because that sidewalk is extremely narrow. And we figured, well, we're in here, let's make it the way that a sidewalk really ought to be, so that people can truly use this restroom facility.
ADA compliant.
Yes, ADA compliant, thank you, that's the form that I'm looking at.
But I think to answer the question, was the total number that was spent, was that on the referendum, or was that in that initial budget? The council has the ability to encumber and re-allot based on the priority of what the administration sees. So a good example is the fire chief came to us previously and said, one of our apparatus is failing. It's near the end of life. We need to readjust. And through SPOS, we had the percentage allocation to the fire department. We had savings. So working with finance and the city administration, we then moved on an opportunity to purchase a newer fire engine and put it in service. And that wasn't on the original layout. It was something that came up later within the public safety realm. Based on the priority of need for the citizens, we were able to adjust. So the bathrooms, like she was saying, as things come in, we order it, and then the marble, the brick, the facade, we're able to adjust that.
And Mr. Mayor, just for clarity too, because anytime you talk to government, it can seem confusing, because it is. You have to purchase the property first. So that in and of itself was huge, because
Over 100,000.
you're not making more property in downtown. So to purchase the property in and of itself, which at the time was utilized for some parking with an identified pad for the bathroom. So there were a number of years, specifically it was March of 2020, when the bank awning was torn down, COVID hit, there was a lot of stall, meaning stop.
Yeah.
So the parking remained, the curb line remained, because the idea that was expressed to council and to the public was the acquisition of the property with downtown parking. If you extrapolate that out of the acquisition of the property and per space of about $5,000 per space, was far less than the industry standard of $10,000 or $15,000 per space of surface parking. So you start there, and then you now have ownership of a pad for a priority of a downtown restroom facility to help businesses that otherwise are saying to the city, we want a downtown restroom facility. It just takes time. So the SPOS is a mechanism that allows you to then build, and the only thing that we can do at the staff level, advising the elected to be good stewards of the community, is to say if we get an estimate of $900,000 to $1 million for a build, but we have an option for a modular to come in at 400,000, and then we spend approximately 100, 200,000, I don't know. I know the facade was 60, 65,000, sidewalk is X amount, the pad. So I mean, there's all these things that you can see, and yes, the totality of the bathrooms in and of itself, the acquisition and the facade is roughly right at 500,000.
That's including the purchase of the property?
No, sir.
No, I think it is.
The bathroom is 400,000,
400,000.
and then the facade improvements and the sidewalk. And that's why I laid it out to where you have to buy the property, there's parking associated, and then there's the bathroom.
I think they're separate. Yes, ma'am.
Another question, and you don't have to answer this right now. I mean, I wanted to respect everybody's time.
Sure.
Do you have any analytics of the revenue as far as in Main Street or all the businesses since downtown live, since we've been doing that versus the expenses to kind of justify that we are doing well whenever we have those big events?
That's a good question, and the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
DDA and the city actually partner with Georgia Power, I believe it is, to provide analytics, and then also DDA works with the business owners. So it's twofold. So Georgia Power, through their analytics, they'll do a geofence, which basically captures anyone in our central business district during a downtown live event. So we can tell you on a normal Saturday versus a downtown live Saturday what the influx of cell phones are. Now, it's kind of weird. It's amazing what information you can capture from that data. I can tell you where you came from, how long you stayed, and when you left, and where you went. Georgia Power has all of that information. And so we do have those analytics, but also DDA works with the business owners to say, hey, how did you do that Saturday? And from what our DDA's been told numerous times is that the downtown live events have often been the best days of the year, including Jeep Fest, including the Christmas parade, and any other event that we've hosted. And so we feel as though those are very beneficial to the downtown businesses.
But like
And
the
Mr.
revenue versus
Yes,
like
Mr.
expenses.
Mayor, I will, so I was in a
It's okay.
different city for 5 months this year. So I'm gonna take some liberties to answer the question generally in terms of downtown America, Georgia. The standard is when you have an event or you have a destinational draw of people who are specifically coming to spend money, like the Downtown Live, it's approximately $100 per family couple type thing. So if you have that $100 mark, and we used 100, I think the real number was 120 or 130 because we did it to help with the downtown hotel. So if you have 5,000 people in an area, that is what the geofencing, and then you extrapolate that per person, you would arrive at a net benefit of, even if the Downtown Development Authority took the 50,000 worth of donations they received, the 22,000 from the hotel motel tax, because once again, there's no general fund money coming through. It's all through these two entities. The impact in terms of saying if it calls for 10,000 each, you're multiplying that out to 100,000+ in terms of an impact to that area. We do not, and most places do not have the sophistication because it's because of private enterprise being possessive of their own points of sale and data.
They typically just tell us a percentage. Oh, it's
Yeah.
30% better,
So
40,
what-
but we don't have a number on it.
What we have to do is say that, yes, based upon industry standards of what someone's going to come and spend because they're purposely coming, and we know that it is in the thousands of people that are attending, yes, the cost benefit for the vendors, for the businesses are 10 times, tenfold.
Okay,
Yeah, but not an actual dollar amount.
all right, that's fair.
Yes,
Last question, I don't think we've seen the planning and zoning or protective inspections in the budget that we went through today. Will you be able to provide kind of organizational flow chart for each of those department, like DDA, planning and zoning, protective inspections, and all the committees, so that we know what each committee is in charge of as far as, and I know we have their budgets.
So Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Sure.
So planning and zoning, as a budgeted general fund, is not the volunteers that sit up here and make decisions. It is the staff persons employed by the city to help with staff reports and the intaking of applications. So that budget is identified here, and the, I believe this consists of the administrative assistant, the director, and the planner. And we can get an organizational chart.
So yeah, I think what you're
Yeah, just
referring
that
to is.
organizational chart.
Sure.
So, and then kind of like what the rules are, especially for protective inspections, because we're not really sure what that entails,
Sure.
because we know protective, like we're just thinking maybe our fire department,
absolutely.
police.
And that's the problem is building inspector. So the person who goes and
Okay.
does a plan review, when someone comes in and says, I want to build a house,
Gotcha.
they have to present a plan.
The
We
state,
have one
the state and
inspector.
federal government call it protective inspections or protective services. And so that's where that comes from. But as far as an organizational chart, we've discussed it a few times as we mature as an organization and the change of leadership and administration here at the city. I don't think that'll be an issue. What oftentimes may cause some confusion for the public is that the council members actually serve on committees. And so we have a public safety committee, which actually includes which two of you? There you go. We have a water committee, which includes which two of you? Then we have a parks committee, which includes these two. We have an executive committee, which includes those two. We have an admin committee, which includes those two. I think that's where really it causes some confusion, because then you have development infrastructure, which is those two.
Yeah, I think there's a lot,
but
and
if you-
people will just
Sure.
not know where to go, who to contact,
Sure.
as far as,
So on things
Yeah.
like that's an elected. Obviously, we're elected by the people. We serve on committees to try to form things to get up to the council level for decisions to be made with the administration.
right.
But then we also have a planning and zoning board. And we also have a downtown development authority. We have different boards and authorities, but then we also have appointments. And so I have appointments that go on the library board. We have appointments to the health board, which is the two of us. So I think
And those
some of
are
those-
opportunities for citizens to serve.
Yes, and that's where we want to look at, and this body's made some great strides where DDA or planning and zoning, we want to open that to the public where anyone that meets the requirements can apply, and that's what we want. And so I think if we can come up with some work charts for the organization itself, it's pretty simple. When you start getting to the ancillary opportunities like boards and committees, that might be a little more complex, but I think we can certainly provide those. It may take us some time to get them to you.
That's all right.
It wouldn't hurt.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you for spending some time with us.
Yeah.
And I know we have someone else with us, and I don't want to overlook the opportunity. Would you like to speak? All right. Well, before I close the public hearing portion, I want to say thank you. I know that it was a long, drawn-out process. And I'll be honest, what I did a little differently tonight was, once you get your questions, we can do the answer, you do your questions. And that is mainly because this room was not packed like it had been. We enjoy public engagement, and I really hope as time progresses, more people get engaged. I think all of us have been talking to people that want to be engaged, they just don't show up necessarily when we have a meeting. So thank you again for being here. I'm going to close the public hearing unless anyone else here wants to speak that hasn't spoken, or if staff or council has anything else that they would like to ask.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Well, no. I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to close the public hearing. All right, council. Next item on the agenda is the discussion portion of this. Mr. Douglas, Ms. Goldner, and Ms. Williams, I will turn it over to you.
So, Mr. Mayor, council, for the public.
Thank y'all.
Going back to the actual expenditure portion of the general fund, you'll see that on each slide, there's a delineation portion of the 2025 adopted budget. Due to the fact that we've advertised this public hearing and the fact that on December 2nd, we had advertised for consideration and possible approval, and due to the fact that
when we talk about team, it is a team effort, but realistically, Lindsay is the singular person to do this. I want to make sure that you all provide us feedback on each of these to say either A, flip the city manager preliminary to the adopted budget, or, and quite candidly, what I anticipate is the red circles we spoke about is really the areas in which we need direction in terms of saying, hey, when you present this on December 2nd, we'd like for it to reflect adding this and this. And for full disclosure, that will increase the use of fund balance because there are no identified sources of revenue beyond the 92 lines that we currently have. So with this, I'm prepared to just, unless there is any sort of specifics for some of these, Lindsay's just dragging it over and gonna finalize it next week and get out to you. And that way on Monday, we'll have the meeting. So on the legislative side, there was no red circles, so we were essentially going to pull over. Same with here.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Education and training and administrative, or legislative, what does that entail, Lindsay?
That's like, GMA, things like that, any little classes that y'all
Okay,
did.
so I know we went over this year, right?
More than, I don't know, I haven't,
Yeah, okay, all right.
it was a lot.
The no red circles there. We're dragging and dropping on executive. Elections, we're gonna drag and drop. I will say that I think we will need to enter an agreement, so that will be forthcoming in the first of the year.
That's annual.
I believe so.
With respect to the finance, again, no red circles, drag and drop. Municipal court, no red circles, however, just wanted to make you aware that in order to continue with our certification, we will need to increase that 2,500 to 4,000, so that will increase. Here's the first red area that just candidly, we can talk about each of those capitals, or at least hearing from chief, you have 10 vests at 1,500, that would need to be 15,000 if it's the pleasure of the council.
Council, it's my suggestion that we allocate and ask staff to move on the 10 desk. Feedback?
So it's coming from general fund?
Yes, sir.
It's come from fund balance. Bulletproof vest in 2024.
Brandon, will you also, for the public's, information, give them the amount of the fund balance that we've got?
Right now, our fund balance,
So I have to add a caveat, unaudited, based upon where we ended in 2023, because that is confusing, that December of 2023 is the official legal fund balance. Cash accounts are always subject to change based on payroll, based on vendors, based on receipts.
Invoices.
we ended 2023 at 3.8 million,
Correct.
so. More right now.
Mr. Douglas, I believe you have authority to give Ms. Williams and Ms. Golder. Pull the vest over.
Any discussion about turnout gear?
Oh, wait,
That's next.
are we doing,
No, what?
are we doing police?
Okay. Now we're starting with Lisa.
Did you have anything else for police you want to discuss?
He's like, hurry, Bob, go with me.
4 people, 4 cars.
4 cars.
Lindsay, how much of SLOSS 2020 have we spent on public safety?
Cars for you, come back next year.
Yes, I have to pull that, I don't know.
I'm sorry,
I have to.
I hear most of it up from over here. That's what I heard from over here.
If you got a calculator, I can start
I
telling you.
didn't hear that when the question was asked, that's where most of it is gone.
So
On safety or not?
for the record, for the requested, department budget, that was removed was, fence back parking lot, 15,000. Glock 19 replacements, those are the firearms, 30,000. 3 radar units, 15,700. Stalker laser, 6,000. 4 vehicles, 189. Equipment for 4 vehicles, 112. Software, 7,000. And obviously the 10 vests. So,
Have we worn out our old blocks?
Some of them. No, we take them, the good thing, I mean, we can take them to block and they will.
Be furrowed.
Anything further, council? Douglas?
fire department,
We just have the bulletproof vest.
Yes, for now.
What are those just go in the trash after they serve their time, the vests?
They can be used, well, we used some of the ones that expired before, like when we built the courtroom. We used them for protective. They still will stop a bullet, it's just your liability ends.
Fire department.
So,
Removed.
so at this point, the capital is approximately $209,445, which is the request. A computer for engine 14 computer, 5,000. Radio, fire hose, turnout gear is lumped in at right at 59,000. You heard Chief earlier say 25,000 for turnout. Vehicle, equipment, 85,500, and radio communication 60. Once again, it's very uncomfortable at times saying that what are you going to remove, but at least at a minimum, the turnout gear of 25,000 is something that I think is critical to include.
Council?
What is that? Because you were talking about radio equipment and stuff being part of that 59,000.
Yes, sir. So the radio communication system was 60,000. The vehicle was 85,000, and then machinery and equipment is right at 59,000, which is a radio, fire hose for E2 and E3, and then the turnout gear.
Okay.
And that was 59 for those three?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think, Mr. Hannah?
I don't know.
Council?
I could, I like to see us put turnout gear in there now.
And also because the fire hose, we might take it from 53 to 59, right?
So the fire hose for E2 and E3 is right at 27. It's actually just over 26. But so
That would be that 59 mark.
That's what I was trying to say.
51,345 for those two.
Spend it all in.
Line item.
Alright, so we have the hose, turnout gear and the hose. Anything further? You good?
and the next is the circle for the street.
Will you remind us what was removed?
Street sweeper.
Well, and part of it is, in all sincerity, the entire capital we're looking at in terms of the notes, street sweeper, excavator, striper. I think that what you heard from Kim and Josh is that again, some of this was done by a different employee, so that's why there's a deviation. So what would be the pleasure in terms of what y'all have to?
Is the equipment the priority? Is the bigger truck the priority?
I will defer to your judgment. I have an opinion, but.
What's your opinion?
So, the second, the street sweeper, the attachment on the skid steer, but instead of an excavator, a uniloader.
What are you talking about, amount for the attachment?
What did we decide that was?
12 to 14,000.
What about the unloader?
71.
Is that what's listed here as 80?
So no, the 85 was an excavator.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, unfortunately, this was published with a different,
And what'd you say for the uniloader? Sorry.
71?
71, and 12 to 14 for the attachment.
Yeah, I got that.
and Mr. Mayor and council, and I apologize for my candor, but the approach that I would take with budgets is clean 75-15. Just for the element of unknown and when we would purchase, because we never go out and purchase these on January 1. So if this is something budgeted, the way that we monitor this, well, some of us don't go out. So.
We're back on this corner again, aren't we? We're back on this corner.
So the recommendation that I would do is 75 to 15, only because, you know, if we come under, that's great, but if we go over, it's not as if we were pinching pennies and have to come to you for a budget amendment for 2,000 or 3,000.
Council 15 for skid steer attachment for room, uniloader for 75. Input, feedback?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Not mine.
No, I don't.
That's technically it is.
Parks, water.
Parks,
Water.
Mr. Hannah, what do you think?
equipment.
I like it, but I don't know, I've gotta break all this down to get fully on board. I mean, the big thing with the sweeper, outside of, eliminating any kind of positions, I mean, is it gonna help you out on these downtown live and or, you know, getting dirt off the road for water when you're cleaning those? Will it save you 1 FTE out there with a shovel blower? And the uniloader too, I don't know what that's used for, so.
Considering we have some parades that they're not listening to us and
Yeah.
they're putting horses in them.
That
would help.
Oh, gosh.
Well, and also you can get the leaves up on the side of the streets.
Yeah.
With a sweeper, you know.
Oh, you're gonna
you
come
take
by and
25
get my
guys,
leaves up
get them
now,
on.
right?
Man, the other day, I went by this over here on DB Carroll and there was 6 of them over there shoveling up leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other examples on Cove, when we had the potential slide, we activated everyone in the county brought one of these attachments out and they
And then the uniloader?
As a matter of fact, I've got it at Nelson right now. It's got an issue with depth fluid.
What do you use the uniloader for, I believe is the question.
At Parole Park, I filled the hole in from the basement where I had it at, yeah.
Storms.
I had the grapple buckets on, ready to remove the trees.
And now it's gonna be shared between those departments.
Yes,
Is that-
yes.
Yeah.
And we could slap some paint on it, maybe red or blue, and lend it to them as well.
Yeah, we can do
Oh,
that.
okay, no,
This, you know,
wrap it?
Yes. I'm saying no, yes.
Anything and everything, right?
Charles, real quickly, your crews in a uniloader, what would you use it for?
I mean, loading gravel and filling back in where we dig in water lines and stuff like that.
Which is a constant.
Charles, y'all are sharing one, is that correct? They are sharing one right
And it
now.
works out that he's got it when I need it, or I got it when he needs it, and it's just,
It's broken.
you gotta haul it from over here to over here, over here to over there, and, you know, it's just, it'd be more time consuming for our time well spent with the extra one for all the crews, and then, you know, hopefully never have it, if we ever have a major storm, got trees down all over town, you know, you got one loader.
You got
running
two
together.
gravel buckets. One's on one side of the county, one's on the other, or city.
So I think the idea is that, you know, Josh's group, the likelihood is that they're going to use it more, and they would have need to be in different locations, which is where the extra piece of equipment would be helpful. But in a pinch, if Charles needs it, you've got one that he could take without being detrimental to the streets department then at that point. Just trying to come up with a way to better utilize these requests that are in here and lower that request.
Is it possible if we get in more SPLOS to cover some of these items too?
So part of why I wanted to have this discussion is I hope y'all have a certain comfort level with the way that we've been approaching how we do the budget. That if we pass a budget with a use of fund balance that includes certain of these items, as a fiduciary of the city, it's our goal to reduce the amount of our savings that we have to use. So if we go to the funding of the fire engine through financing half of it, then what that entails is the monies that are allocated now, set aside each month, will then be open for the vest and the 60,000 for chief sheriff. You can't spend money on the uniloader, but you're spending that much less of the general fund savings because now you've moved those items and purchased it out of SPLOST. But I do not want to mislead into saying that it's going to happen with the financing part. So I wanted the expectations to be, we're at 186 use of fund balance, 182. We know we're gonna have an additional 50,000 use of fund balance on those three items, the EAP, the PTSD, and then the technology. So we're at approximately 220 to 230. So what Lindsay's gonna do at the conclusion of this discussion is then say to you all, you're at 230 now, and you added, 60,000 of fire. Now you're at 290, 15,000, you're now at 305. So remember, we had projected during the millage discussions a use of fund balance of 377 with a 1 mil approval.
We're still below that.
So what we were trying to do is whittle it down to where it's more manageable for you all to approach the budget process. So rather than starting here, I take it as a good point that we're actually starting in a better position.
And realize that there is time for this, and there are budget amendments, and there are opportunities to borrow that was brought up.
Question for, I guess, about Pearl Park. Do we anticipate using all of that this coming year? I mean,
Ambitiously, I would say yes.
Right,
Practically,
I think it was on 26.
yeah,
yeah,
practically.
I'm just curious, because that's what I'm, wondering if we, or,
But that cost only runs through 26.
correct.
So that's
It's-
the accrual
that's gonna-
process.
Right. I know that's gonna be the accrual, but depending on what happens for the next one, I mean, I understand that, but the reason I
We
was
do have
asking.
higher months and lower months, so the higher months help.
True.
So skid steer attachment gear loader. Mr. Looney, I think you said you were comfortable with it.
I'm comfortable with adding that.
Mr. Hannah was gnawing on it.
No one,
Is it just us?
no, no one is, no.
Gnawing on it.
I can get behind it.
Well, I think this being his first budget process, it is a lot to take in at one time when you're talking about, we're gonna be this far in debt, we're pulling this out of here. It's
We
a
have
lot
done it
to,
this way, I mean, never really, but this is good.
yeah, it's good conversation. I think it's good for the department heads as well to see, you know, we talked about this a little bit last year with everybody doesn't go buy everything January 1 for a reason. You know, so,
The other thing is there's also gonna be a surplus sale, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And those funds are not anticipated in the budget.
yeah.
that was one of my questions I wrote down tonight.
We actually have an idea for ours.
All right.
We have some blocks in the surplus.
Kim's thinking, let's go get some.
I knew they had expand, I just,
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, the, pardon?
No.
Can
you ask for money?
No, we're getting there, hold on.
Okay.
We're getting there.
It's your time.
Wait your turn, you go to the bathroom.
Sure.
So with regards to the circle and the parks, it's easier, in my experience, to talk about one-time purchases versus the ongoing hit to the budget. As an example, a $30,000 employee with salary and benefits is really a $50,000 to $60,000 employee because of insurance, retirement, workers' comp, all the particulars. So when you say one person, the reason why you see 101 is the department request, that's, you know, essentially 33,000 or so that you think you could probably get an employee. And then the other items that you see on your screen that's below the 101. The reason we remove that is in terms of what Josh has demonstrated as the leader, is, and I think Mr. Hannah can attest to, there has already been, and remember, he's only been in this role for about 10 months. So I think oftentimes we forget that it takes several months just to get a grip onto the enormity of some things. So what you're going to see, the mayor alluded to it, is you're starting to see positive traction with some areas in terms of how he can then start assessing the personnel, assessing the needs and resources of equipment. And I feel comfortable that even if we do not fund these positions, based on the leader at the helm, he'll be able to allocate those resources appropriately. Case in point, he's already started on Summit Peace. He's going to move over to City Park. He's already taken the initiative to just kind of make the site of Perot a little safer. So I'm comfortable that going to the streets again, hiring that unfilled budget position, if we can. That's always another thing is, you know, getting it. It will help. So that's my 2 cents on saying, yes, we would like to have 2 or 3, but at this moment in time, it's easier to say yes on 90,000 one time, knowing that in 2026, that cost is not going to continue to occur.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a comment about, going back to the strategic plan that we did last August, which I'm gonna continue to go back to until I guess I fade off into the sunset, but we did make a commitment to our parks, and that was above and beyond, Perot Park. That was really not even part of that commitment. And even though those two things have now kind of melded together and they're being held side by side, I still wanna make sure that if we can fund these positions, that we continue to make parks a priority. And as soon as we can fund them, or Josh can figure out a way to do it, that we continue to
Allocate staffing.
put some stuff there.
It's needed, if not now, then
Well,
definitely in a year or two it's gonna be.
But we have spent a lot on parks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe not relative to parade, but since this started, that's been an initiative from the very beginning. And it did kind of get sidetracked, but, I want to make sure. And of course, the persistent question, I don't think originally the bathrooms were supposed to be coming out of SPOS, but I mean, it's certainly appropriate they did, but we never anticipated that.
Mr. Douglas, could you go back one slide, sir? I want to make sure that on this for contract inspections, the request is that we take this to $50,000, so I believe the buy-in from council is $35,000 in addition to that.
I misspoke.
Is this where you ask for money?
Yes. It's supposed to be an additional $50,000.
Okay.
So if you look back at my activity on this, it's 36 is what I used this year roughly. And so with all the additional inspections and the commercial development, which obviously is my, basically health and safety for all of the projects, but we have so much commercial coming up. So, I would need the additional 50,000, not 35 to make it 50.
We should have just skipped that slide, Douglas.
Pardon?
I was at
Can you go on
35.
to the next one, or should you skip over that?
Council, that comes out of 3 areas: mechanical, plumbing, and electrical inspections that we use a firm for as things ramp up through projects. Need for 50,000 more for that firm is needed.
She's about to have a heart attack over there, can you? Comes out of mechanical, what'd you say?
The 3 areas of inspection that this firm is specializing in is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Can we anticipate that for the entire year?
Yes. So one additional thing, so with commercial building inspections, because our building inspector is new and has not done commercial before, I feel, the way that we started off the process was to start off doing interior renovations. He passes building inspector and his plan reviewer. So doing easing them into the process, making sure and, working with actually our contractor to, almost like as a peer mentor type thing. And so with the type of huge commercial development, I mean, Publix at 60,000 square feet, things like that, I really feel that it's important to have somebody with the amount of knowledge that our contractor brings to the table.
Anybody to that? Council, any feedback or input on the 50,000?
Do we have any way of recouping any of
I
those?
was about to say, like, impact fees or
I
anything
mean,
to
I'm
cover
just-
that.
I don't know, that's why I'm asking, I'm not sure.
So theoretically, the building permit fees are supposed to cover the building officials or the building inspector. Because our building inspector is not certified in these 3 areas is why we have to go out. So, that's why we have the building permit fees and that's why we raise the building permit fees. There's really,
Do you anticipate you need the outside inspection for a full year? Or?
yes,
Okay.
I don't see this remedying itself this year.
And your inspector doesn't do commercial, of course, because we knew he was new, correct?
Right, so what he is qualified to inspect is footings, framing, wrapping, and that's it. So the other 3 are obviously the guts that we don't want. Unless you're certified, we don't want you inspected.
Amen.
Alright, Mr. Douglas? Next slide.
What did we do on that one?
We skipped it. Did you hear? Next slide.
There $80,000 in savings just went away.
So I'll tell you that with utmost sincerity, when it comes to the top portion, it's not we have the ability to say no because we have a duty that we have to provide. And there's a whole nother conversation that can be had in executive session with regards to personnel. But in terms of the need, it's gotta be included, just as, I mean, or else we just have to say no. And you cannot say no when you're the issuing authority on some of these things. So what that means for me is, if you're prepared to give her $40,000 for her technology, no, I'm joking.
Now, let's explain this. If you get this, you're not getting anything else.
Well, I do have one more thing.
Oh.
No, this is preventative. So you all know that I do a lot of the stormwater stuff.
You gotta come down here if you want to ask.
You come sit beside me.
Yeah. So you all know that I do a lot of the stormwater stuff. So, earlier this fall, I went out with Kinley Horn, their geologist, their stream guy, and one of their engineers. And we toured what we're calling the top 8 concerns for stormwater in the city. And so they came up with a proposal for $30,000 to provide us with the construction cost, the longevity, how much longer this has before it blows type thing, you know, that's a poor term. Basically helping us to plan for capital improvements down the line. And so there was the 8 projects, some of them are huge, but they give us the estimated construction cost as well, and the breakdown of what will need to happen, and also for an additional $4,000, which grants we can seek in order to get that funding for those projects and, you know, to outline the capital year. So that was $34,000. So there's 8 major areas, and as you know how much Pioneer Road cost, and that was minor compared to some of these. I mean, we're talking, you know, a couple of them are over $1 million to fix, and it's not an if, it's a when. So kind of like our aging water and sewer infrastructure, our storm structure is not great. So just throwing that out there, but that's it, that's all. I mean, Ryan would like a truck too, but. And maybe some Falcon gloves.
I may be able to work on that.
Maybe other opportunities there.
Falcon gloves.
Mr. Douglas?
No.
Well, I wasn't saying move forward, I was just saying, let's discuss this.
That's just throwing that out there.
That was 35, the software was showing at 110. Again, that was for E-Plan, where individuals could look at their projects online, submit online.
Is that who we looked at years ago?
No, the one we looked at years ago was free.
Yeah.
But I don't believe it had the same functionality.
Well, do we need all these functionalities?
I don't know.
Keyboard power.
We need to get it down to 40. Right, 40,000.
40.
Yeah.
That's just it.
So the 110's 40 now?
Yes. So that, if you think about that as well, because it's not just gonna be my department, utilities, for plan review, fire department as well, for the fire marshal.
Oh,
See what you're
that
doing.
changes it.
I know.
She's trying to put part of that monkey on your back.
I'm gonna stay quiet on that
So that's 40, the 34 you were describing is not that. Those
No,
are two
that's
separate items, there's a 40,000, there's a 34,000.
Yeah, the 34,000 was for the stormwater capital improvement line items and grant opportunities.
So I don't want to step on any toes. There is a question about 2014 SPLOST, and stormwater or drainage is an allowable expenditure under 2014 SPLOST. We have talked about potentially using that remaining money for the matching. That is also something that we could potentially use that money for, or some of it, to pay for that stormwater report, depending upon what ends up happening with the potential financing of the fire truck, the new engine coming, and maybe freeing up some of the other SPOS money. I'm not trying to misspeak, I think there may be some opportunities where we could potentially cover that item in a different way, alternative way.
Is this a mid-year thing, January 2nd thing, or?
They did this, I think they did a review, and first I said, well, we'll see how SPOS goes. Because then that SPOS was for Storm and Street, so we didn't get it, so, and then I put it in the budget, they told them I would put it in the budget, so it can be, it's not a January, I don't want them out there in this weather anyways. But, also the winter is the best months to assess the actual, because we don't have all the kudzu and all of that. So they're gonna be in the city, I can't get rid of because they're gonna be in the city, going through our pipes and running all their stuff. So winter, even though it's our rainy season, it's better because there's no kudzu covering everything.
So Mr. Mayor, Council, just to kind of let you know kind of the thoughts, going back to July, August, September, October, when we were talking about, you have a December 2023 end of year fund balance of 3.8 million. The mid-year budget amendment is use of fund balance of about 800,000. So there was always an expectation of about $3 million thereabouts when we get to the end of 2024. Now, the trouble with speaking in these generalities are there are way too many other variables. But in terms of broad-based decision-making, I think it's important to know that we make assumptions. So when we did the 1 mil increase, we had already projected with you all that there was going to be a use of fund balance of around 377,000. Part of what we were doing was reducing and trying to cut expenses as directed. That put us at 183, 182 and change, 183. The items that we've added back in, which I think are needed, take away the stormwater element of 34,000, you're at a use of fund balance of 451. So if you're starting at 183, it's one perspective. If you're starting at 377, which once again, when we start identifying $2+ million worth of needs, we were never going to get to that point. But the 377, we felt as though if we're at 3 million, if the audit comes in June, July, and they say you ended 2024 at 3 million, then we knew we were going to be at about 2.6. I mean, in terms of at the end of 2025, because you have to keep a certain level of money in your savings. So we were at least comfortable when the 1 mil increase was proposed because we knew we should be around at 3 million. So right now, if you say 450, again, starting at 300 or 3 million, you're now at 255. That's okay. It doesn't be okay for Lindsay, but at least from where we knew when we're having millage rate discussions, we knew we were going to dip into it in order to balance the budget without reduction in force. So not to take anything away from the 34,000, that's just another 34,000. There are no identified monies to do the needed infrastructure improvements. The pavement assessment, the stormwater assessment, all of those things are very vital for identifying the needs. The T-SPLOST was the revenue of about $1.8 million a year to the city coffers to help address these items as another source of revenue that we heard through the public hearings of trying to achieve. I just want to contextualize everything to set expectations accurately that even the 34,000 is money well spent, but the 2014 SPLOST will only go so far. We could use the 34,000 there. If we finance the fire engine, it could help free up some capital for public safety and additional grant monies. But that's where we're starting to get tight. So just, I'll hush on that. Is that accurate, Lindsay?
I don't like to go flow too
I'm okay with putting off the storm assessment.
Well, and I was just fixing to say, it's kind of like when we talked about salaries, it does, if we don't have a way to do anything with it,
Let's change.
is it gonna help us this year?
And-
And I know we can only kick so many things down the road.
And to Kim's
Part of that was to get an idea of grants that were available.
And to Kim's point, I think if we reconcile the 2014 numbers and we know better in the first quarter where we're at with respect to any excess SPOS monies, any sort of additional grant matches for the town, I at least, as an advisor to you all, would feel more comfortable saying, hey, when we amend the budget first quarter, we're gonna use 34 out of 2014 SPOS to help with the assessment. It may not be the timing, but I think it's worthwhile, but I still want to be cognizant of the fact that we know, based upon our estimates of 2026, based upon the homestead exemption that has been approved by the voters, we will not realize a really big jump in property tax value. That's going to be capped in perpetuity. So that's why I want us to be mindful that if last year we were already going to have to budget a use of fund balance, this year we're going to have to, next year, based upon our estimates at 3% with the 1 mil increase, we're still going to have to use fund balance. 27, 28 is when we start hoping some things come on the digest that could then help to offset the use of fund balance. Thank you.
Council? Anything further on that?
I got lost on that one. Is that something that you're willing to look at in a budget amendment?
Yes, sir.
First quarter?
Yes, sir.
All right.
You didn't get lost, you just thought you were lost.
Mr. Douglas?
And that was it. I mean, other than the 40,000 for the software that, maybe next year we'll put it in Chief Shear's budget to see if, Chief Dawkins will.
All right, Mr. Douglas, are those all the slides you need to go through?
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Are we failing in something?
No.
What's it?
First quarter.
Two items I wanted to mention before we do call for a motion to adjourn. Number one is looking at the fire engine allocation and provide finance options for half of the total amount. Council, I believe that is a wonderful way to free up some finances and allow us to move on other items such as the software needed. So are we all good with finance looking at those options? That's on the fire engine that would arrive next year.
Next October,
We hope.
hopefully.
And maybe 2026 at this rate.
So what model will it be when it gets there?
The important
That
thing
put us in a better
is that
position.
we locked in the 2022 price.
I mean, because we're still gonna pay it back, so, I mean, as far as just kind of pushed it out, so to speak.
Don't forget.
Did we talk about that when that was approved, that we might end up doing that?
No.
No, we talked about not being in any debt and not
Yeah.
financing any of it, paying cash
did.
for it.
I kind of remember there was a caveat there, maybe.
I think there may have been some discussion about that when we ended up buying, when we found out it was going to be late,
Okay.
and we ended up
We
buying
bought three, and we
used
bought
the
one.
other
the second. Maybe it's some discussion then.
So, council, do you find it appropriate to look at financing options for half the total amount of the engine?
Certainly.
They look at it, yeah.
The only other item that I have is that we have two areas of need for our staff. One is the building department, one is the admin wing. Both of those do need AC and heat abilities. The mini split units that we have that are in certain parts of the building, Mr. Douglas, what do those run per piece?
So I will say, Mr. Mayor, the capital, general fund capital that we amended
Is it covered?
is covered because of the amount that we were estimating for the front improvements for USDA compliance. We should have sufficient funding to cover those. at least in some capacity.
Okay.
That's not there right now.
And
It's
council, I have
summertime.
nothing further on that. Mr.
Thank you.
Douglas, Ms. Golden, or anything?
Water.
Why don't we just skip that?
What?
Y'all gonna let me decide on water?
Capital plan on enterprise fund.
Sewer and water.
So- So I will say that, again, the exercise we went through with the mid-year budget amendments, we're already gonna use a significant amount of fund balance. I think it was about close to 3.8 to 4 million at the end of fiscal year 23. So if we're gonna use $1 million to cover the 24 budget, you're starting again at about 3 million. Just candidly, based on the GFA projects and based upon what capital we already have allocated in the perpetual fund that we're gonna work on, I don't think we have to incur additional capital items unless it gets to a mid-year budget amendment and we've knocked out all those 2024 identified items. Then we'd come to you, we'll be done with the audit, we'll be able to say, hey, this is where we are, and here's some additional monies for lift stations, pumps, lines. Is that fair?
I think it is, as we mentioned, there are monies in that perpetual fund that we are working on, we have not spent. If we need to adjust, then we will certainly do that until we know that we are on better footing, but I agree. We have GFA projects that are going to need additional items as well. So.
And usually I've always called those business accounts. Those are business accounts. So there's a revolving perpetual use of capital infrastructure. General fund governmental accounting is a little different, a little more rigid. The business account aspect of running a utility is a little more fluid. We just continue to keep y'all apprised with amendments or otherwise.
Seeing nothing else from the administration or council, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.